Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's edition of Remolity Reports. Tonight is a very special night. I'm running my interviews with Changemakers 4 live with Suzie Dawson. Suzie Dawson is an extraordinary person, as many of you who know her already know already. She is an international journalist from New Zealand. She's currently in temporary asylum in Russia. She is an activist with a background in the Occupy movement. She's a journalist who's covered very many subjects and events and movements. She's covered corruption in New Zealand politics. She's covered Gaza. She's covered the Snowden documents. She's also an analyst, and she's currently working on an extraordinary initiative. I guess it's called a World First Journalism Initiative. Decipher You, where she and, I understand, Elizabeth Leah Voss from Disobedient Media are together analyzing some of the Snowden documents that were released a little while ago, but they're going in and doing a kind of line-by-line analysis and discovering all sorts of major new things in those documents, learning, and presenting them to the world. And they're doing this live as well on a regular basis. So many of you already know that. There's a great deal in Suzie's resume, her roster of accomplishments to mention. So I'll mention a few things and we'll go into a few things as we start our conversation this evening. One of them is her documentary that she created, Diary of a Person of Interest, an absolutely awesome documentary. I recommend that everybody watch it. It talks about the work that she's done with the Occupy movement, the work that many activists did in New Zealand, the surveillance in New Zealand, and how the surveillance in New Zealand connects with the surveillance in the US and the UK, in all of the Five Eyes countries, how the NSA and FBI are involved with the GCSB, the GCHQ, and all these other spy agencies, and so on and so forth. But it's also a very intimate account of her own experience with suddenly becoming the subject of surveillance, and how she dealt with it, and the kind of advice that she offers to people if ever they find themselves in similar situations. So that's one extraordinary documentary. There's so much else. Perhaps at this point, Suzie, I should just simply say good evening, hello, thank you for joining me. And, where should we start is really the question.
I think you just gave a pretty good recap. Obviously, hi guys, I can see you there in chat. My name is Suzie. I'm from New Zealand, but yes, I am currently living in Russia. I've applied for temporary asylum. I'm still engaged in a very long, complex legal process that is related to that. I am the leader of the Internet Party of New Zealand and stood
That's
for the
what I forgot to mention. Sorry.
the 2017 general election last year on behalf of the party. Internet Party is a registered political party in New Zealand, which was founded by Kim.com, the internet visionary, who himself was a target of the FBI and who there is a current pending prosecution against at the Eastern District Court of Virginia in America, Virginia, of course, being home of the CIA. The same prosecutor that is after Kim is the prosecutor that is after Julian Assange and is after Edward Snowden. So my work has obviously covered WikiLeaks and Snowden and Kim's case in pretty intimate detail over the last 6 years, which goes some of the ways to explaining why I myself got caught in the web, as is the name of Kim's documentary about his case.
Yes, you explained in your documentary that, your connection with WikiLeaks, in a sense, also brought you under fire as far as these spy agencies are concerned, because for some reason they seem to be focusing on anybody with the slightest hint of an attachment to WikiLeaks, whether you were a WikiLeaks supporter or if you wrote about them, anything, right?
Sure. So the way that the targeting priorities work is if you are involved in consuming information from WikiLeaks or other sources that they target, that's enough to get you on a list. If you're involved in circulating that information, you're up a rank on the target list. If you're involved in advocating for the targeted organizations or taking actions, real world actions, or encouraging other people to take actions, you go another step further up the list. So because I was organizing on the ground, and because I was involved in all of these related topics, and because of my journalism, that's part of how I got in such hot water. I think that any of the individual things was enough for me to be a target. My involvement with Kim was enough by itself. My advocacy for Snowden was enough by itself. My advocacy for WikiLeaks was enough by itself. My involvement with occupiers will obviously put me on the map for them, because we know that FBI and the fusion centres were involved in targeting occupiers, key occupiers, particularly any occupier who was related to the media and communications infrastructure of the occupation, as I was, or involved in the finance, or seen as a leader figure within a movement, even though we didn't have leaders and we went out of our way to be anonymous and not put our names out there. Their infiltrators in the movement identified who was contributing the most in these areas, and that was enough to initially get me targeted. So I think that's the escalation, like from when I was initially identified as an occupier to then my advocacy and my journalism and my movement organizing, is what really aggravated it and escalated it over time.
Mm-hmm. And when you say you were an Occupy activist, was that the sort of the first kind of public thing that you were engaged in that you think
Well, I'd been posting just like on my own social media accounts about WikiLeaks and reading WikiLeaks for about a year at that point, but I didn't consider myself an activist. I remember the first times that I was referred to by other people as an activist, I was shocked, because I actually thought, I'm not an activist. Like, I'm just helping these people. I'm just spreading the word. I didn't even click. I didn't make the connection that was what an activist does, and that made me an activist, because I'd never seen myself as fulfilling an activist role. I thought I was just trying to help the people. I was just like taking food and trying to keep everyone alive. Like,
you were a human rights advocate. You were simply looking around and seeing what needed to be changed in the world, and you were jumping in, right?
I saw that other people cared in the thousands, because there were thoughts that I'd been thinking in my head for a decade or more that all of a sudden other people were saying. And that was the moment where I was like, wow, like, it's not just me that thinks this stuff. It's not just me that wants this change. All these people are coming together and doing it. And so I felt a massive responsibility. I was like, how can I not go and help? Like, they're speaking my words. They want what I want. I am like obligated to do everything I can to support that.
Absolutely. You just felt that you were part of a larger movement, a larger community of people, all of whom were fighting for the same thing, or in a sense, just speaking out for the same thing. It wasn't even fighting. The word activist these days has come under, has endured such transmogrifications thanks to the ways in which the spy agencies have taken that word and changed its value and its meaning, or attempted to do so. Whereas many of us know that the word activist is really connected with human rights advocacy, right?
I think it's Caitlin Johnston who said, like, I was just trying to make the world a better place. And that's exactly right. But unfortunately, and we need activism. All positive social change in human history has come from people getting together and demanding it en masse. But unfortunately, this all coincided with the privatization of state intelligence functions. And what that meant is that activism became an investment opportunity for private security companies to posture activism as being related to terrorism, so that they could use counterterrorism resources and funding to target activists. And that's absolutely unconscionable, because when the terrorism laws and post 9/11 and terrorism funding was being justified to the public, it was being justified as something that would happen over there in Iraq, in Afghanistan, over there, to other people, to actual militants with actual weapons who are actually hurting people. Never once did they say, these are the laws and these are the funds that will empower private, for-profit security agencies to target unarmed civilians, not military, not army, not soldiers, not terrorists, but civilians, normal people in the suburbs just trying to make their own countries better. But that's precisely what happened and precisely what they did to us. At Occupy, we had no concept that that was going to happen. We thought maybe like the police are like looking for drugs, maybe that, you know, if there's an undercover, maybe it's because they just want to see is someone selling weed or is someone like this. Never in a million years did we even begin to imagine that we would be infiltrated by this entire surveillance like apparatus of the state, or that it had international tentacles. We didn't know any of that. We had no idea. It took years to uncover it.
Absolutely. And I think you bring out very well the fact that that's what really happened. They took the word activist and they equated it with terrorist. And then they pulled out their little counter-terrorism activities and budgets and, you know, directed all of them against activists. Or against anybody in communities, anybody who became outspoken, anybody who stood up for anything, you know, anybody advocating for clean air, clean water, animals, humans, people in nursing homes, anything. It became an excuse.
Activists, anti-fracking activists, you name it, anybody that is taking on the mainstream narratives on any topic. In New Zealand, we've had cases of doctors, scientists, researchers, teachers, even teachers organising against charter schools, targeted, totally mainstream people. And this is the thing, that when you have private security and you have corporate security companies, they, to increase their profits, they have to increase the target pool. So the target pool gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's an absolutely untenable situation. And unfortunately, this is the situation we're facing today. To go back a little bit to what you were doing then, you on your website, you say you've got the words citizen journalist up. So I wanted to ask you about that. When you first started to cover some of those events and movements, you know, starting from Occupy days, did you consider yourself a citizen journalist? How did that all begin?
Just like I didn't consider myself an activist, because it never occurred to me. I'd never made a decision like I'm going to become an activist. So that's why I didn't think of myself as one. I didn't think to myself, I'm going to become a journalist. I want to become a journalist. It was purely need driven. And the need was because the mainstream media completely blacked out the movement. So we needed to tell people what was happening. We couldn't get, for love or money, anybody to give us the platform to tell New Zealanders what was happening, what was going on, why they should support us, why we should do it. And that was my wake up moment, was when I was watching One Police Plaza in New York City, and they had thousands of occupiers marching to the headquarters of the NYPD, and they're marching under this huge archway. You can see the videos on YouTube, they're amazing. I watched the live streams of it when it was happening, and all you could hear echoing all around was, "We are the 99%." And it's like almost like the walls were shaking from how loud it was. And I went racing to the New Zealand Herald website thinking, yeah, there's going to be like coverage of this, and there was nothing at all. And then I went to like CNN.com, and there was nothing. And I'm looking at this live stream, I'm like, there's tens of thousands of people converging on the headquarters of the NYPD at One Police Plaza. Where is the coverage? Where is the coverage? And there was nothing, not one word, not one sentence, not one snippet on the TV news, nothing. And that was the thing that really got me about that, was I thought to myself, if they've covered this up, if they are omitting to even tell anyone that this has happened, if this will not even be in the history books because they didn't say a word about it, what else didn't they cover? And that was all I could think, like, what else didn't they cover? What has happened all throughout human history that they didn't put in the newspaper and they didn't put on the TV? And that was my holy crap. I've been consuming this censored, manufactured junk for my entire life. where they don't even tell you when massive events are happening. And that was my, well, shit, if they won't do it, we have to. And from that moment, I was like, we're going to do this. If they won't tell people, we will tell people. We will make sure everyone knows. So I was working with our live stream. We have our media team is like this ragtag group of like occupiers that just out of sheer determination like came together to collaborate, to tell everybody in the world what was happening on the ground in Auckland, show them everything we could. So our live streamer was live broadcasting to this whole network of occupiers all around the world, and just literally like with nothing but a cell phone running around like, look what we're doing, look what we're building, look what action we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And I was just taking photos and tweeting them and writing Facebook posts, and we're using all the Occupy platforms and in terms of like our local Occupies Facebook page and Twitter account and blah, 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 blah. And then as the FBI raid on Kim.com's house happened on a Friday night before the Monday morning eviction of Occupy Auckland. And that was a devastating day for us, because that was where we watched people that we loved and had lived with basically very closely for months be completely brutalised by the police in New Zealand, and the media lie about it. And the whole thing was this nasty, nasty setup. And I clicked a few days later, excuse me, a few days later, I think it was on the Thursday that week, it was the second eviction on the Wednesday, and then on the Thursday, the mainstream media reported that the FBI had left the country. And when they reported that, again, something clicked in my brain, and I realized the FBI were here last Friday for Kim.com raid, and they've left on Thursday, and the Occupy evictions happened on the Monday and the Wednesday. And I realized that they were there, they were at the Occupy evictions, and they had absolutely no legal grounds whatsoever to be meddling in domestic political affairs in New Zealand. None. Sorry, I'm just going to have a drink because now I've got a frog in my throat.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so sorry. I know that you're still a little bit under the weather, and, so I'm grateful that you're doing this interview at all. But that's extraordinary that all of it went down in that way. We were talking a little bit before, and you had talked also about how for a brief moment in time, it seems, New Zealand became kind of excluded from this Five Eyes focus that we now know still has returned and continues. And you were a part of that. You were a part of making that happen. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
I wasn't, because I was only a few years old when that happened.
Oh, sorry. You knew about it.
Sorry.
There's a connection with you, though. I'm going to tease it out.
I was very involved in the GCSB movement, in viraling the hashtag GCSB to about 50,000 tweets between 2012, 2013, and then in the nationwide protest marches that occurred after that. Because in the wake of the Kim.com raid, we discovered 88 New Zealand citizens had been illegally spied on by the GCSB, which is New Zealand equivalent of the NSA. And those, that was a violation of their charter, of their founding charter. They were not allowed to spy on New Zealand citizens at all. Years later, we discovered not only did they spy on 88 New Zealand citizens, they in fact took the private data of those citizens and sent it to the NSA and had them targeted by the NSA, which is an even more egregious violation. However, the events you're talking about happened in the 80s. So in the 80s...
Right. I'm realizing now, and it had to do with the anti-nuclear movement, right?
Correct. So New Zealanders were virulently opposed to nuclear technology, and they did not want US nuclear-powered warships entering New Zealand waters. And after many years, actually, of violent street clashes between anti-nuclear protesters and police on the streets of New Zealand, the government finally backed down and passed anti-nuclear legislation and banned the US nuclear-powered warships from our waters. And at that time, New Zealand was kicked out of the Five Eyes spying arrangement between Australia, US, UK, Canada, and New Zealand. That is the most proud moment in New Zealand political history. And that is the environment that I grew up in. I grew up in a New Zealand that had said no to America, that had said no to the biggest powers in the rest of the world. And that is why it was so unbelievably offensive to me to have United States agencies interfering in New Zealand domestic affairs. And then to have our own spy agencies sending our data to the Americans is, to me, I view it wholeheartedly as treason. When you take the data of your own citizenry and you supply it to a foreign nation, it is treason. And in the Cullen Reddy report in New Zealand, an investigation into the intelligence services, they clearly stated that the domestic affairs of New Zealand, the national security of New Zealand, can never be wholly synonymous with the national security priorities of another country. Meaning that it can never be the argument that, oh, it's because we're partners with America, we're working with America. No, America's interests are not New Zealand's interests. New Zealand's interests are New Zealand's interests. And the data of New Zealanders belongs to New Zealanders. It does not belong to the Americans. It does not belong to the NSA. And
absolutely. And I would say the same for every country, right? I mean,
absolutely. And I believe personally that the spies that have gone way out of the bounds of the limits of their charters should be up on charges for that, because they have violated the public trust and they've violated their public mandate. And quite frankly, it should be them living in exile, not me for pointing that out.
Oh, absolutely. And let's hope the tide is turning right now with everything that's going down in DC, right now, with the FBI coming under deeper scrutiny, etc. Let's hope, right? I don't know to what extent any change is possible to even envision with these spy agencies. But change has to happen, right? If humanity has to be treated justly in the world. So
I think that the change comes from people and the willingness of people, and the willingness of people comes from education and access to information. And so that's really been the focus with my journalism, is to bring this information that they will never see come to them through their TV sets, that they will never see published in their local newspaper, to bring that information to light and to as many people as possible.
That's absolutely brilliant. And so literally what you were talking about and what you started doing is literally grassroots journalism, on the ground journalism. You were simply covering things that were happening on the ground that were not being covered, on CNN or any of the big news stations or in any of the newspapers. And I remember the anti-war marches, in the 90s, they were totally not covered at all. Absolutely shocking. It's very similar to the Occupy movement marches and protests. They weren't covered. So it's pretty brilliant that you, from inside the movement, being somebody who was trying to work from inside, also began to stand outside a little bit, and you took your camera and you took your pen and you started to record and document and started to put the news out. And it's interesting also that you started there to use social media to get the information out, because that's another aspect. And when we come down to what you're doing now and in the future, what you plan to do, I'd really like to touch on that, because that seems to be an aspect of what everybody is sort of grappling with today. If you're a journalist or a writer or a documentarian, to some extent, you end up using social media. So we'll talk about that. I'm very interested, however, in how you became an organizer, because from activist to journalist, at some point, you also became an organizer. You kind of came to the forefront in some way. So tell us more about that, and tell us, how exactly you feel. Ultimately, I think, from everything that you say and that you present in your documentary, you became one of the targeted, one of the 88 targeted that you think that you are. So how did that happen? What kind of organizational work were you doing?
In terms of the targeting, it started out really like low-grade targeting, them just breaking into my house and whatnot during the Occupy movement. It was actually December 13th or somewhere around there in 2011 was the first time that my house was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but they made it very apparent that they literally smashed a window from the inside of my house rather than the outside of my house. And then over time, that just became harassment by local agents, and then it became the street teams of what people would refer to as gang stalking. And then my vehicle started being tampered with. I had time and time again, my car tires slashed, my mail arriving opened, my constant intrusions and disturbances inside my home, and in very obvious ways, so that I would know that they'd been there, but not enough that I could actually prove it to the police or anything. They would do these very subtle mind trick, mind game type things just to terrify me, but to prevent me being able to get any redress or actually do anything about it. There was interference with my relationships, with my career, my job, my finances, my absolutely every aspect of my life, my communications, every form of communication, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As I was working on the GCSB movement, that was when things really began to get really, really hot. And that was because it was the first time that we were directly targeting the intelligence agencies. It was no longer just that we were working for social change. We were working for change at the top of the, a lot closer to the top rung. Whereas like at first we were up against the local council, that's annoying to them, but not that bad. Then we were targeting government ministers in the government who were corrupt and issues there. And that's more of concern to them, but not once
cutting close to the bone.
Once you go after the military infrastructure, that's when they're really out to harm you. They're really out to hurt you.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. And then throughout 2014, the Moment of Truth event, helping with that, and other major things that were going on, Snowden speaking in New Zealand, revelations about mass surveillance in New Zealand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In the lead up to that general election, the Prime Minister his butt was on the line. It was on the line in a big, big way, and so was the agencies. The GCSB movement rightly and justly completely obliterated the reputation of the spy agencies in New Zealand. 90% of the country was against them getting increased powers, was disgusted with the revelations of what they'd been up to. And they were basically low throughout the entire population of the country. And the vote in Parliament to give them increased powers and funding came down to one vote. They were one vote away. So it got very, very hot during that period, very, very terrifying. That's when they actually started trying, setting my car, the incident in my car catching on fire, the other incident of them trying to drive me off a cliff, literally.
Oh my goodness.
Things like that. So that was, and constant death threats and telling me that if I didn't leave the country, I was dead, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was really the most terrifying and difficult year for me, was that year. So in terms of organising, it was never, I feel like all of this has been really accidental. I accidentally became an activist. I accidentally became a journalist. I accidentally started organising these massive movements, but because it was never deliberate. It was never, I never intended. I never
wasn't an intention or a plan. Yeah.
2 months' time I'll do this, or 3 months' time I'll do this. It was never like that. It was always responding to the conditions of the moment and trying to hold the powers to account for what they had been doing to our country. And people say to me like, "Oh, you have kids. How could you get involved in this?" But for me, I'm sitting there. I'm like, they're spying on my entire country. Like, here's my one little life, right? I can go, oh, my one little life is so precious. I must be quiet and do nothing. And then they will sell my entire country to the United States. Or I can decide, actually, my life is worth risking for the sake of every person in my country and for my kids' futures and everybody else's futures. And so for me, there was no choice. Of course you are going to tell people what's happening when it affects all of them. And of course you are going to fight for justice and fight for change when you have corrupt people selling your entire citizenry out to a foreign nation. Like, it's your obligation. It's not like some great act of courage. It's an act of obligation. You have an obligation to share this information, to inform people, and an obligation to hold those who are doing this to account. So that was really where I was coming from with it. So for me, the organizing side was nothing more than just telling people, this is major. We've got to do something about it. We've got to do something about it now. We've got to fight back.
Hmm. And that's pretty brilliant because, that ultimately, that was just a natural response. And it sounds like, in a sense, that's what motivates and inspires people to listen and to hear and to see what's going on, and also to begin to take action themselves. And as you say, it's not, planned, it's not considered, it's not a big movement when it happens, but it does take a certain amount of initiative and courage, and not everybody answers the call. So I think you, in kind of answering the call or responding naturally to, behaving naturally, as as to what was natural for you, in a sense, were expressing something much larger than yourself, and helping obviously your entire country by doing that.
I call it righteous indignation. That's how I describe it. Righteous indignation. Like, these agencies have wronged every person in my country, and I am indignant about that, and I'm rightly indignant about that. And therefore, it is my obligation to tell everybody that I can. This is what they're doing. This is how they're doing it. This is who they're doing it to. This is what we need to do about it. Jump on board, get with me, and let's do it. That's righteous indignation. I don't see it as I don't see it as, I know people call it brave or courageous or whatever. To me, it's righteous indignation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just what seems right. I'm very curious, based on everything that you were doing at that time period, and then looking at the scene currently, with the Five Eyes and all these intel agreements. And now I think we all have a better understanding of how all of these intelligence agencies around the world are sort of acting in tandem with each other. How do you see that whole thing? And how do you see this whole notion of globalism versus national sovereignty in the world today?
I see that there really is globalists who want one global country that they control. It's not just that they want us all to love each other and get along and all be... No, they want to centralize the planet so that there is a single point of control. So we had this, actually, there's a good analogy about Occupy with this. At Occupy, there was more than a month prior to the evictions. The internal saboteurs had this plot to shut down the occupation, to sabotage it from the inside and shut it down. And I've found that whenever these agencies pour resources into a plan, whenever they have an evil plot to carry out, some karma, some cosmic karma comes and throws a screwdriver, a spanner in the works at the wrong moment. So they had this plot that on Christmas Eve, when every single person was going off on holiday and there wouldn't be as many people at the occupation, they were going to make this fake General Assembly decision to shut down the Occupy and to move everything to storage and to just get rid of it all. And they got this close to success, but we cottoned on to what they were doing. We threw that spanner in the works and we split up and created multiple different occupations. We had a group go down to another park, a group go up to another park. But anyways, to cut a long story short, on Christmas Eve, they thought they were shutting us down. By Boxing Day, there wasn't one occupation anymore, there was three. And then a couple of weeks after that, the fourth one started up. So by the time the cops got back from holiday, the one occupier that had been spending months trying to shut down, now there was four locations and four occupations. So if they hadn't messed with the first one in the first place, there never would have been 2, 3, or 4. But now they had four separate occupations, separate groups, and the public was being exposed to our ideas and influences in 4 separate locations instead of just one. I've seen this time and time again throughout my activism. And my targeting is actually a really good example, because a huge factor of what has driven me through this is that every time they do some nasty, evil, malicious thing to punish me, every time they do something horrible to hurt me, it proves to me that they're the bad guys and that I am on the right side.
Oh, absolutely.
It actually makes me more determined than ever. And the more disgusting things I see them do to other people, the more I know that I'm right to dedicate my life to fighting against this. So in a way, they create their own opposition, because by their crimes, the egregiousness of their crimes and their corruption and their targeting of people creates the resistance to them.
Absolutely.
And so in that way, they can never shut it down because it's self-perpetuating.
That's pretty brilliant. Thank you for that analysis. Yeah, they invoke
Sorry,
their own
Dawson,
opposition.
tangent there. I know you're actually asking me about sovereignty. The reality is we've already got at a data level, globalization is the status quo. Okay, so
Yeah,
the
it's already
NSA
happened.
partnerships with over 100 countries. They call it the extended enterprise and the global network. And what they've done is in these partner agreements that they have, I called it like a reverse tiered wedding cake. So, you know, like the traditional wedding cake that looks like this. Turn it upside down so that the bigger fat layer is at the top and it tapers down at the bottom. Imagine an upside down pyramid, okay? People think about a power structure as being a pyramid.
Yeah.
The data structure is an inverted pyramid. The bulk of the data is up the top. So what happens is the NSA is up at the top and they suck up all the data from all the countries underneath. And then they filter back down the portions of data that it suits them to give those countries. So what they do is they say, give us all of your data, tap your cables, your internet cables, and send it all to the US in bulk. And then they, in exchange, we will give you data that's pertinent to your country. We won't give you access to all of it. We'll just
they're the arbiters of the data. They're not going to
other people. So right now we've got the Dutch are about to pass a mass surveillance law, which has already been passed years since in New Zealand and everywhere else. And the Dutch are being told, you give NSA all your data because you're a partner, and we will give you all the global data from the global network that relates to your country. So you will be all knowing and powerful about things that affect your country. But what they're missing is that the NSA is collecting the entire planet. So the NSA is holding maximum power over everybody else. And as far as I'm concerned, these other global agencies that are signing these partnership agreements and supplying their own citizens' data to the NSA are committing acts of treason against their own people. They're not serving the interests of their own people by supplying their own bulk private citizens' data to a foreign power.
Absolutely, and it's very top down because it suggests that the NSA holds the reins and has the power over every other country. And the language that you mentioned, extended enterprise and global networks, is that the language in these intel agreements?
That is precisely what they call it. So they consider because the other thing you have to understand is that as part of these agreements, and please know, guys, I'm not, at the moment, I haven't sat here and showed you the docs, but every single thing that I'm saying to you today is something that we have uncovered from the NSA's own documents. I can, if you want any reference points for this, I can give you links to the documents and to our reporting on them. The NSA considers I'm trying to not explain it in technical terms, trying to explain it in a way people can understand. The NSA doesn't just take the data from the countries. The NSA gets itself access to that country's systems. So one of the things we discovered is that the NSA can operate the satellite equipment of any partner agency. So if Netherlands goes and sticks a satellite up in space for whatever, the NSA can operate that satellite themselves. New Zealand has a spy base at Reply. NSA, it was proven also, I mean, I know it from the docs because the NSA says they can do it. But for a real world proven example, Kim.com has sued the New Zealand government and the spy agencies for spying on him past the time that they had a legal authorization to. And in the discovery documents in that court case, the GCSB said they stopped spying on Kim at a certain date, but their equipment continued spying on him. And how it continued spying on him was because it was not being operated by the New Zealand agencies. It was being operated by the NSA. So when the NSA is spying on a New Zealander, they're using New Zealand's network to spy on that New Zealander. They're using New Zealand's hardware and equipment. They can operate, same thing with the Australians and the spy base at Pine Gap, which is involved in the targeting of drone killings in Afghanistan and wherever else. The NSA can access and utilize that network and hardware without even the involvement of the host country.
So and the host country is permitting it.
Sorry?
The host country is permitting it, and that's what these agreements are about, that permission.
This is the global network. So the global network is the NSA can access and has reach through all of these countries. I'm just going to cough again for a second.
Oh, absolutely, please. Wow, this is pretty mind-boggling information here, that every single country is permitting this kind of absolute takeover of every one of their facilities in order to give the NSA such absolute permission. So
the most interesting thing is that the NSA sells it to the partner agencies as, we are in this together, we're working together,
great.
It's a co-equal partnership, it's a win-win situation. But in the NSA's own documents, which are top secret and don't reference, because some of their documents, you can tell from the top who is able to see the documents. Like if it says Five Eye, then anyone from the Five Eyes can see those documents. If it's US only or US Israel only, which is the two top tiers of documents, in those documents, they blatantly, openly saying that this is for the benefit of the NSA and not for the partners. And they talk about, one of the things they talk about is how doing this setup that they've got means that they can utilize the resources of all of the spy agencies of the world for the US spying priorities. So they are sending their development projects to different spy agencies around the world and getting them to build software for the NSA's benefit, and getting them to build network extensions for the NSA's benefit. And the NSA considers that this is very smart of them to do, because they have the extended enterprise means the NSA is no longer just the resources and budget of the NSA. The NSA is now the resources and budget of every partner agency and themselves together, which makes them exponentially more powerful than if they were just a standalone agency.
That's absolutely astounding. And the fact that you say of course, we know the US is at the top, but the NSA is at the top, but then right next to it is the US and Israel. That's also equally fascinating, I'm sure,
Correct.
to very many people.
There is a two eyes arrangement, which is the US and Israel. Israel has a preferred partner status above every country in the world, bar the US.
Absolutely shocking. And you know what it also suggests is that every other country in the world has, in a sense, been subjugated by the US to permit such a partnership.
Subjugated. And the other thing is that we discovered that the original Five Eyes Agreement, the fact that this partnership had been formed in, I believe, 1949, sometime in the 40s, was not known to the Prime Minister of of Australia until 1975. For 26 years, the leader of the country did not know that its spy agencies was working with foreign powers. So what that means is that the entire political process is bullshit.
I was going to say.
It is reality television. This whole lie that you have to wait 4 years before you get one vote to pick Clinton or Trump or whoever is a total fiction, because the agreements between these agencies are not made in the political sphere, they're made in the military sphere. The militaries are running the world. The politics are the reality TV show to make the public feel like they have a say and feel like they have some input and to divert their attention. But the militaries are running the world.
Thank you for spelling that out, because what you are bringing forward over here is the information from the documents, from the actual agreements, right, between these military agencies, and the NSA is a military agency.
Correct. We discovered that another secret agreement was formed between NSA and GCHQ in 2004. We still don't know the particulars of the agreement. We know it was signed by the directors of the agencies involved. There was no reference whatsoever to disclosure of it to congressional oversight committees, to anyone in the political process whatsoever. There's a multitude of documents that outright say that they will not accept oversight. They actually specifically name the 9/11 Commission and the Congressional Oversight Intelligence Committee, Congressional Intelligence Committee and Senate Intelligence Committee. They name them and say, we do not want to accept any solution imposed by them. We will implement our own solutions. So they're very, very autonomous. They have an entire office called the Congressional Liaison Office, and this is where they stranglehold the information that gets to Congress and the directions coming in from Congress. And this office is responsible for making sure that NSA still gets to do whatever the hell it wants to do, how it wants to do it, and that Congress keeps their noses out of it. Congress gets told whatever it needs to be told to keep them happy and keep them quiet, and they get told nothing else.
And, when people want any changes made, or they see the horrors of surveillance going on, and they're approaching their congressmen and their congresswomen, I mean, people have no idea that this is the backstory. This is the superstructure. This is what's behind the whole setup. So there's no way that we, the people, get to have a say in this kind of scenario where the spy agencies have absolute power and kind of barricade themselves behind this kind of, we don't want oversight and we're not getting oversight because we're the ones.
And then when we peel back the layers of power even further, and this is what we've been doing in Decipher You, the question is, who is giving the orders to the NSA? And the answer is not the president, not the government, not the Congress or the intelligence committees. The answer is the NSA's customers. This is what they call them. So the NSA has a customer portal, which is like a web portal, a secure web portal, where the customers of the NSA can request intelligence from the NSA, and then the NSA runs off and fulfills those intelligence requests. We found out a number of very interesting things about this. One, the Federal Reserve Bank of America is a customer of the NSA.
Very interesting.
They are a customer of the NSA. The Federal Reserve Bank of America is not a government department, and it is a customer of the NSA listed in the NSA's own documents. The next interesting thing that we found out is that everybody from the Department of Energy to the Department of Agriculture is a customer of NSA. Now, you would not think that the Department of Agriculture is running around with a bunch of signals intelligence, top secret documents, but in fact they are. So then the question is, if the Department of Agriculture is a customer of the NSA, who are the customers of the Department of Agriculture? What do they do with that information when they get it? Are they giving it to Monsanto? Are they giving it to other major corporations that they work with closely? So we saw one of the big lies that you hear all the time, that Sean Henry guy from CrowdStrike, the ex-FBI guy, I watched his DEF CON talk, and he says over and over and over, we don't spy for economic reasons. We only spy for terror, blah, blah. That is total crap. All the way through these documents, they have a global economic forum where they coordinate the economic spying with agencies from all around the world and with economists and figures related to these corporations. They are completely focused on economic spying and spying for economic reasons.
Wow.
It's a total farce to say that they are not.
That's pretty intense. And, the fact that all of these people, it literally sounds of the Federal Bank, Monsanto, the Department of Energy, Agriculture, probably the Department of Commerce, every other department in the US government. If everybody is a customer, then those customers are the ones who get a say so here. It's their policy.
They are literally giving the orders to the NSA. But now here's the next scary thing we discovered. We discovered that they have something called database reporting that they implemented in 2003, 2004. What database reporting means is when the customer puts in their orders through their portal to the NSA doesn't look up do the spying, look up the intelligence, write an analysis document and send it back to the customer. That's what used to happen. Instead, the orders came down that we will now supply customers with the databases, not the analysis reporting.
Oh, wow.
So what this means is that, let me try and give an example for you. So a customer, maybe say the FBI is a customer, or whoever, CIA is a customer, both of them are customers of the NSA. They would say, we are interested in Suzie. We want to know this about Suzie. Then the NSA would prepare a report and send it back to them. What database reporting means is they can say, we are interested in Suzie's internet service provider, and the NSA will hack the internet service provider and hand over the entire records, the entire database of the entire internet service provider to the CIA or to the FBI. So no longer are they writing up a report on what Suzie's doing. They just hand them a big chunk, a big piece of the data. What that means is that the customer doesn't have to justify they don't have to specify the reasons or even what they're interested in the way that they used to have to do. Now they can say we're interested in that ISP rather than saying we're interested in that target.
Very interesting. They don't have to justify or rationalize. They don't have to provide a reason. They don't have to document a reason. They can
it allows them to zoom out, right? It allows them to zoom out. And by doing that, it obscures what they're actually interested in. And you're right, it will obscure the audit trail. So speaking of audit trails, one of the other discoveries that we made is that the NSA is outsourcing all of its network security operations and things like this. They only have, I think it was less than 10 network security staff out of a staff of 14,000 people. So, and I couldn't work out why they would do this, because from an IT perspective, it makes no sense whatsoever to be giving these contracts to operate their servers and everything to commercial entities. It makes no sense whatsoever. It should be done in-house. And then it was pointed out to me that the reason for that is because if it is given to a third-party supplier in the private space, that the NSA audits, it gives them the ability to avoid audit trails on what
it's not linear anymore. It's very multiplied.
It takes the responsibility away from NSA to have to justify what it is they're doing. But it also is a huge risk for them of penetration. It's a huge security risk for them. Everything about their business model is a huge security risk. They were using Oracle databases. They're using Microsoft Exchange Server to communicate. They're using Dell workstations. They're using really, I would have expected, with my IT background, I would have expected them to be developing all their solutions in-house, to be maintaining all their servers and network security in-house. I wouldn't expect them to be using proprietary packages, because when you do that, you open yourself to proprietary exploits. And also it means your security is only as good as your third-party private supplier, which is not going to be as good as your in-house trained staff. So that really surprised me, but apparently it's because they're pushing the responsibility for what they're doing away from them.
They're spreading the risk. And it's also a matter of plausible deniability, right? It wasn't us.
1 second, I'm just going to grab some water so I don't cough.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Wow, this is a sizzling conversation. Absolutely wild. So let me just drop in go right ahead. Take your time. I'm going to look at the chat for a moment. Oh, dear. I haven't been keeping on top of the chat, but I hope people will forgive me. It's very hard for me to look at two things at one time, both the chat and keep tabs on our conversation. But you guys who are listening, I guess you know that this has turned out to be quite an extraordinary conversation, well beyond what I had even imagined, because Suzie's been kind enough to share her knowledge of what she's learning from all of these close analyses of these Snowden documents and NSA documents. And haven't spoken with her as yet, but I'm hoping that she will provide links to some of the references that she promised, and we can stick it below the video shortly. So I will do that when she is able to come back. Now, I should also tell people that we are running this through Suzie's Zoom account on my channel, so I can't quite flip to a screen or show you her website at this point in time, which I would have liked to do. But what I can do is probably just...
You can go ahead, just hit share screen and you should be able to show them whatever you like.
Oh, really? Is that how it works? Share screen. Okay, let me see. Where is that? Oh dear, I don't see it. Oh, share screen. Okay. All right, share screen. Where is your web page? Oops. Are you seeing my screen at this point in time?
No, I cannot. You need to hit the first one.
Oh, okay.
Desktop 1. You need to select desktop 1. There you
Okay,
go.
I just did. Do you see it? Okay.
You're in your email though, so you probably want to jump out of that.
Yeah, I know. There we go. Here is Susie's website, and it is suzie3d.com.
We're still
Fabulous
looking at your
site.
email.
Sorry?
We are still looking at your email.
You're still looking at my email.
Yeah,
Still?
you need to close the share screen and then open it again and select desktop 1.
Let me close my email. Maybe that'll help. Screen share window is closed. I'm sorry to be so bad at this.
It's okay. Hit share screen and it will say desktop 1. Select desktop 1 and then open what you want to look at.
Oh, I see. I've got to hit desktop. Okay. Okay. And then can I select this? Can you see the screen now?
And we'll now be able to see whatever you're looking at, and we can see my website right now.
Oh, okay. All right. So this is Susie's website. Do you see it, Suzie?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, brilliant. So I just wanted to show people Susie's page, and she's talking here about her desireforyou.com series of blog posts, her live stream, her videos over there. Oh, and the anti-spy bill. So I wanted to talk about all this so we can, just to get back to what we were talking about, if you wanted to go right back and talk about what you were talking about with the NSA, and we can bring it. You know what I was thinking initially. Okay, let me stop sharing at this point.
I can hear you fine.
Are you still away from your?
No, I'm here. I'm right here.
All right, good. Okay. So one of the things I've been wanting to ask you also about was your internet party, how you got, involved with that. And, but, take us but this is so fascinating what you were talking about, the NSA and the audit trail and so forth. Did we finish covering that? We know that they're covering everything and they're hiding everything, but...
Sure, if you like, I can just run you guys through some of the findings if you want to see the documents for yourself.
Brilliant. Yes, yeah.
Or alternately, I can just post them on Twitter afterwards. It's all right. Yeah, if you want to have a look, I'll just have a scroll through what we've got here.
Oh, yeah.
So I wrote an article a couple of days ago. I'll share my screen. And if we just go to Steam it, bear with me for a minute, I'll find it for you. So in this article, the article is on a completely, well, it's actually on the Dutch topic, on the topic of what's going on in the Netherlands. And at the bottom of that article, because most of my arguments in the article are related to findings from the Snowden files. Here we go. And at the bottom, I just selected 10 of our top findings, but they were things that were really significant to me. So one of the things that you often hear, I'll just take this off as I do an intro. One of the things you often hear to discredit the Snowden files is, oh, we heard that all before. We knew that before. We knew the NSA was doing this. We knew about it. It's not news. Snowden didn't tell us anything. Well, I'll just tell you a couple of things about that. First of all, there is a huge difference between what we thought they were doing and what we said we thought they were doing with what they say they were doing in their own documents. When you have documents from the NSA telling you that they were doing it, that is a completely different level of verification and evidence than us what we think they were doing or what we had suspected they were doing.
Absolutely.
So what Snowden did is give the verified evidence that it was occurring. And that's what all of us needed, because that took it out of the realm of conspiracy theory and into history, documented evidence history. Because reporters won't report on what we think they're doing, but reporters have to report on documented evidence of what they're doing. And so that was the first major thing. The second thing I would say to people who make that claim is we did not know that JTRIG existed. We did not know there was a unit within GCHQ that was specifically tasked with making fake blog sites about people, destroying people's reputation, using psychological tools and manipulation against targets to discredit them. We did not know this stuff. Snowden gave us the proof. He gave us the methodology. He gave us the specific operational names and the units that were involved in doing this. And he got it all on permanent historical record in a way that can be referenced for generations to come. So that is the significance of the Snowden leaks. Now, what I've discovered since we've started analysing the documents for ourselves is I've discovered what didn't make it into the reporting. And what that is that it is not just about surveillance and privacy. Believe me, I was prepared to risk my life for privacy, for the issue of the human right to privacy, and to fight against the surveillance. But what I've learned from studying these documents is that it's not just about privacy or surveillance. It is about control of the entire planet, the money, the countries, the entire infrastructure, the entire fabric of society is touched on in those documents. There are documents where they talk about how they want to influence the advancements of technology of private corporations, how they will prevent corporations from developing things they don't want them to develop, and how they will influence is the word they use. They want to influence the advance of technology in the commercial sector. This is way out of their purview, way out of their charter, way out of what they're supposed to be doing. But this is what they're doing and what they admit to doing. So I'll quickly just take you through these 10 that are in my article, and I'm sure if any of my friends or Internet Party people are in the chat, could you share the link to that article for people? That would be really helpful. So this is 10 things I found. I've linked to the source document, so you can go and look for them yourself just by clicking on it. So the first one is that there was internal NSA resistance to the 9/11 Commission and Senate Intelligence Committee's oversight. Now, these committees had been tasked with reining in the NSA, holding them responsible for their practices. So this guy in the NSA, who was from this Congressional Liaison Office, says, and I quote, "The congressional committees investigating the attacks of September 11th, the 9/11 Commission, and the Senate Intelligence Committee have all complained of NSA overclassifying too much information, which prevents it being FOIA'd or getting into the public sphere. My worry," this the NSA employee guy, "my worry is that a consensus is building within Congress that they need to take action to deal with this. Trust me, we don't want that." Direct quote from NSA, and he's talking to the entire NSA workforce. This document is from the SID Today files, which is an internal publication of the NSA. So this is an NSA guy from the Congressional Liaison Office. It's telling the entire NSA workforce, trust me, we don't want the 9/11 Commission and Senate Intelligence Committee to force us to declassify documents about what we are doing. We need to address this issue so that the solution is one of our creation and not one that is imposed on us from the outside. So this is the absolute documented, verified evidence that
absolute smoking gun here. The solution.
That the NSA was internally resistant to the oversight mechanisms that are legislatively imposed upon them, that are supposed to set the bounds of what it is that they're doing. One of the other findings that I didn't actually list it in this top 10 of my article, but one of the other findings that we made was that they have, sorry, just drag this over so I can stop the share for a second. They have these directives, intelligence directives, that are supposed to be their internal rules for what they are and are not allowed to do. Well, they realized that they were doing all of these things which weren't in their directives. So what do you think they did? Do you think they went and told Congress, oh, actually, we've been doing things that aren't in our directives? No, they wrote a letter to all their staff and said, we've identified that we're doing things that aren't in our directives. So we've decided to revise our directives. So now someone is going to come to you and we are going to update our intelligence directives to reflect what it is that you're doing. So they changed the rules to allow what they've already been doing, instead of changing what they're doing to be within the rules. And this is the attitude of the NSA. That is just absolutely the attitude of the NSA. It's also what we see with these law changes, because the law changes are retroactive. They were already mass surveilling people before they had the laws in place to mass surveil them.
Absolutely. They're doing it everywhere. And, it's the same kind of thinking with the parallel construction that the FBI uses.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that we've been asking ourselves now is, we know the FBI does parallel reconstruction, but does that mean that the other NSA customers also do it? For example, going back to that Department of Agriculture example that we were talking about earlier, the Department of Agriculture isn't allowed to tell its own customers, be that Monsanto or whoever else, where they got information from. Just like the FBI can't even tell a court that they got information from the NSA. That's why they do parallel reconstruction, which means they already know something's a fact. In Decipher You, we use the example, we always make me the target. We said, Suzie, the NSA told the FBI that Suzie has a safe in her house with diamonds in it, something in it, gold in it, whatever. Okay? The FBI can't tell a court Suzie has a safe with diamonds in it. So the FBI said, sends someone around to my house and says, we are here because we believe you've violated copyright on some DVDs that you have in your lounge. So we have a search warrant. We're going to raid your house for those DVDs. And oh, look, we just happened to have found a safe with diamonds in it while we were looking for the DVDs. And then they go to the court and say, when we raided her house for her DVDs, we happened to find the safe with the diamonds and gold in it. Okay, that's parallel reconstruction. So they already knew what they're looking for, but they cook up some lie for why they're looking, for something else, so that they can use it as a pretext to get what they actually wanted in the first place.
And so it's to cover up the trail, the trail.
So if the FBI is doing that, then is the economic spying information that's going to these customers, are they using parallel reconstruction so that they can then supply that information to their customers without disclosing that it came from the NSA? There's a question. We don't know the answer to that yet. We're up to 25 episodes in Decipher You. You can go and watch literally 45 or 50.
Yes, I think at this point I'm definitely going to have to pour over them. This is
and that's where we're up to right now, is that we thought the NSA were the bad guys. We came across a document where they take credit for George W. Bush's speech for the Iraq War at the UN and Colin Powell's speech. They take credit for that bad intelligence that they used to justify the war. So we're like, wow, NSA are such horrible assholes. They've killed millions of people. But then we realized, hang on a second, NSA didn't just do that. They were asked to do that. They were asked to provide that intelligence. Who were they asked by? Well, the State Department is a customer of the NSA. The CIA is a customer of the NSA. So we realized it's actually these customers are driving. The NSA is like the eye of Sauron, right? But the customers are the ones who are directing it. The customers are the ones who are driving it. The NSA is just a vehicle. And so what we're trying to get to now, and we're hoping that we'll find more documents that relate to it, is more information about what these customers are getting the NSA to do and on what pretext, and then where they in turn are passing the information to. So that's what we're looking into in the future.
Suzie, this is absolutely phenomenal information, and I'm surprised that it actually wasn't reported. You say that all of this information wasn't reported earlier.
Of course, look, it's funny because I have people, actually I had someone yesterday even, just they try and say to me, oh, you're the agent, you're the something, whatever. I had this in New Zealand too, even when I was covering actions, because this is what the agents do, is they don't want people to listen to you. They don't want people to use your work, read your work, consume your work. So they'll try to discredit you, right? So they'll try and say that I'm an agent or whatever. But if someone looks carefully, they'll see that I went public about me being in Russia and having applied for asylum in October of 2016. And 500 people shared my press release about it, which in New Zealand is a significant amount of shares for just something that you put out. But not one single media organisation in New Zealand acknowledged the fact that a New Zealander was seeking asylum in Russia, the same country as Edward Snowden. Not one publication admitted it until some independent publications 2 months later reported on it, and then some blog posts in New Zealand reported on it, some bloggers, but still not the mainstream media. And then the first mainstream media acknowledgement that I was even in Russia or had applied for asylum or anything didn't come until June of 2017. And that was because they were forced to, because I was announced as the leader of the party and was standing for the general election. So they covered up my situation, even though it was in the public sphere. They prevented the New Zealand public from even knowing I existed or anything about my situation for 8 months. So if I was an agent, if I was some whatever stooge, stand-up, whatever, limited hangout, whatever they call it, the mainstream media would have been all over my case from day one. They would have been like, she's amazing, she's incredible, look at this story. No, they wanted silence. They did everything they could to prevent, and still to this day, I mean, look what I'm the leader of a political party. I've been analysing Snowden documents for the last 3 months. Not one media outlet in New Zealand has covered it.
Oh, really? No. Oh, I'm very surprised by that.
Look,
I thought your Decipher Youth project was
even when I stood for the election, the entire New Zealand media had to acknowledge me, so they all wrote exactly one article, and then they blacked me out for the entire rest of the election campaign. Not one word. Now, you'd think the fact that a New Zealand journalist is standing for election from exile in the other side of the world, you'd think that would be an international news story. You would expect to hear that on
major news story,
right?
No,
it should be.
Extraordinary.
But no international recognition whatsoever. There was one piece written about me in the Huffington Post prior to the New Zealand coverage, and absolutely nothing after that whatsoever. I'd like to point out something else. When the entire New Zealand media simultaneously in June wrote about me, they did a hatchet job. They put at the top of the article, Suzie is in self-imposed exile. And I was like, self-imposed exile? So what? I just decided it would be quite fun to flee my country with my kids and live on the other side of the world with nothing, literally living out of suitcases. That sounds like a really good time, what a great idea. No, of course I fucking didn't, excuse my language. I was literally hounded out of my country, and that's why I'm living in exile. And it's disgusting that they tried to discredit me by saying I was in self-imposed exile. But then I thought to myself, I'm sure I've heard that term somewhere before. I'm sure I've heard it. So I went and Google searched self-imposed exile, and guess what I came up with? Thousands of results. Self-imposed exile Assange, self-imposed exile Assange, self-imposed exile Assange. Thousands more results. Snowden living in self-imposed exile, Snowden living in self-imposed exile, Snowden living in self-imposed exile. So I went back to the reporter at the New Zealand Herald who'd written the original piece, and I said to him, where did you get the word self-imposed exile? I'm clearly not living in self-imposed exile. And he said, and I screenshotted and released it, he said the news chief inserted those words into the top of the article the day before we went to press.
Oh, wow. That's total Operation Mockingbird, it sounds like.
They deliberately, they knew that my story was going to break nationwide after 8 months of them covering it up. So they offset that by inserting the word self-imposed exile right at the top of the piece that hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders were going to say. So this is the kind of collusion between the government and the agencies and the media being evidenced, right? And this
Absolutely.
is why they swing back and forth between trying to discredit me, calling me crazy or whatever else, or saying I'm in exile for kicks. They swing between that and total silence. So they either black out my work and pretend that I don't exist, or discredit me. So I think it's pretty obvious to anyone with a thinking brain that I'm actually legit, because if I was not legit, that's not how they would treat me. They would be holding me up to the heavens, you know?
Yeah, apparently so, because that's what they do, right? I mean, they hold up people whom they want to promote because those people are doing things they consider quote unquote safe, right?
And the thing
Whereas,
with Snowden is the thing people need to understand with Snowden, because then they think, well, Snowden's got so many accolades that means that he must be a fake, because otherwise how would he get all of this attention, this everything else? There's a few factors that you need to consider. First is that when Snowden first came out, he was not given accolades. He was not given awards. He was not held up by the media. We were told that he was the coward that fled, that he wasn't like Manning, who at least stood up and took the punishment, that he was the coward.
Right, I read that. Yeah.
You know, when you look at the people who supported Snowden in the first days of what was happening with him in Hong Kong, Michael Hastings, 20 of his last 40 tweets, or somewhere thereabouts, at least 50% of his most recent tweets on his timeline, were pro-Snowden, standing up for Snowden at a time that almost nobody else was. And at that same time, Michael Hastings was investigating the director of the CIA. And Michael Hastings' car was blown up on a Los Angeles boulevard at the end of June in 2013, about 3 weeks after Snowden had come out into the public sphere. It was not popular to support Snowden when Snowden was on the run and when he was in Sheremetyevo here in Moscow. It was not safe to support Snowden. It was an extremely dangerous time. We didn't know whether Ed would even live. We had no guarantee whatsoever that he would even live to see the following month. What happened is that Glenn successfully broke the story into mainstream media in a way that could not be ignored. So when they cannot black it out, and when there is already enough of a cacophony growing, because John Cusack put out that first pro-Snowden piece, that was the first major public piece to say, I'm on Snowden's side, at a time when Snowden was being called a traitor and people were calling for his head and he was considered a dead man. He was literally considered a dead man walking. The odds of him even surviving in those days were like this. People took for granted that they were going to wake up and hear on the news killed or captured. Like that was just the belief, because there was not the huge support for him. Everyone thought that was just an inevitable thing. It was going to happen. And thank God it didn't. When the media cannot control what is happening, they find a way to seize the narrative. So the way that they were able to seize and control the Snowden leaks was by embracing Snowden. So if you remember, he didn't even talk to the media. For 6 months, he wanted nothing to do with them. He didn't do a single interview, nothing. So Glenn's reporting was churning out, this independent reporting was churning out. The Washington Post and New York Times and others were reporting on some documents and some findings. But the majority of what you learn from the Snowden files, you will never read in the Washington Post or the New York Times or in The Guardian. Now, remember what The Guardian did. The Guardian left Snowden in Hong Kong. They left him for dead. They took the documents and the reporting and they left him for dead in Hong Kong. They did not give him any assistance or help whatsoever. Literally, they flew their editor back to London with the documents. When GCHQ raided The Guardian, which in itself is another sign, the fact that The Guardian was actually raided by them, then they participated in the destroying of the hard drives. So The Guardian became complicit with the destruction of the documents. Okay? So these are all telltale signals that Snowden was legit. So when Snowden broke out and really got a lot of support coming out, he didn't even come out to the media until already WikiLeaks had been organizing for 6 months to get people on his side, to give him enough safety and enough of a platform. Sarah didn't leave Moscow for 4 months. She stayed here with Ed in handheld, because imagine the emotional state that you would be in having gone through something like that. You know, and she said WikiLeaks did not abandon Ed. WikiLeaks saved his life, and then they didn't abandon him. They stayed with him every step of the way, and they protected him. And this is something that people don't understand about Julian. And they don't understand, if we lose Julian, we lose not just Julian, we lose every journalist whose life he would save, every whistleblower, every source whose life he would save for the years to come. WikiLeaks is the only organization that will support people in life or death situations that no mainstream media organization. I mean, I love Glenn for a lot of reasons, but even Glenn and Laura left Ed. They had to for the sake of the reporting. Ed told them to for the sake of the reporting, leave him. But at the end of the day, Julian saved Ed. And Julian might not get to save the next Ed if we don't save Julian. And this is something people need
That's such important information that you're reminding everybody of, because I think, as you say, many people have either forgotten or not been very aware of all of the facts. For instance, I don't know, I don't think I recall that John Cusack was the one who first wrote about Snowden.
He wrote a piece called The Snowden Principle.
Okay, that's right. I remember that piece.
Important piece. It's an extremely important piece because it was the first major piece to be written by someone independent of the reporting in support of Snowden. And it took more than a year to really build a movement of support for Snowden. But people forget that he didn't just walk into a massive support network. It was never taken for granted that he would even still be walking and talking. You know, that was never the case.
Yeah. But you know, I think.
On that topic.
Go ahead.
In my documentary, I talk about the methods of institutionalization, the different ways that they try to control people. Like, they could do it through money, they could do it through putting you in jail, they could do it through putting you in a psych hospital to discredit you. The awards, the accolades are in and of themselves a method of institutionalization. So at a certain point, if they can't control your rise, then they will boost and elevate you, because then you have this reputation that you have something to lose. Whenever you have something to lose,
you have to protect your reputation.
Exactly. So now Ed's not talking to 50 people, he's talking to 3 million people. He has to think, what does this look like to 3 million people? How are these people going to receive it? What is the impact going to be on my career, my situation, my whatever? He's got 100 million things he has to juggle when he makes any one decision. This in and of itself, being elevated to that level of visibility, is in of itself a method of institutionalization. So people need to understand that he wasn't just given awards because he's a limited hangout. All of the accolades and the awards partly are genuine because he really did do something spectacularly, phenomenally, historically important. But the other half of it is an attempt to mainstream him, because when they mainstream him, they can control him. So this is a part of the control mechanism.
That's also in play, is what you're saying. Yeah, very interesting. You know, of course, there's a lot of interest still in Snowden's documents, in the documents because I gather there's so many thousands of files that he is supposed to have taken from the NSA, and there's a lot of interest in it. So therefore, I think that also fuels interest in what you are doing, which is looking at the raw data, in a sense.
I'd actually just like to address, because I'm just looking at some of the things that are in chat that are being said about Julian. So the first thing that you need to understand is that WikiLeaks is the #1 target of the intelligence agencies of the entire Western world. Okay. And because he is the #1 target, they don't want you to like him. They don't want you to support him. They don't want you to read the WikiLeaks files. They don't want you to share the WikiLeaks files. They want you to believe that Assange is a Nazi, pro-Israel, anti-woman, fascist, rapist. Any ist that they can make you think about Julian is what they want you to think. Tortured Solstice saying that he's not very likable. Well, Tortured Solstice, I'm not sure how likable you would be if you had been through what Julian has. What people don't realize is that he might have been in the embassy for 6 or 7 years, but for 3 years before that, he was being hunted around Europe by teams of intelligence agents who were installing massive spying equipment and literally torturing him even before he ever had to seek exile. So it actually doesn't even matter whether or not you like him, because his human rights are non-negotiable regardless of what his personality is or whether or not he's a good person.
And as a
But
matter of fact, hasn't a lot of that been debunked? You know, those
I'm
charges
seeing
laid
stuff
against
being
him, they
put
were
in the chat
fabricated,
right
etc.
now that is, this is Standard Intelligence Agency attempts to discredit him.
Right.
They're saying that he grew up in a cult in Australia and that he's some bleached white hair crazy figure. First of all, where you grew up has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on who you are when you're in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s. If you discredit people based on I mean, I'm a high school dropout too. I dropped out when I was 15. Does that mean I can't read Snowden documents?
Suzie, that actually is mind-blowing. And we talked about that before we started.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing, like saying...
Because you're highly accomplished. I mean, anybody who hasn't read your work needs to read your work because it's absolutely astounding.
Saying don't like WikiLeaks because, you know, he grew up in a cult. I mean, first of all, what he did was he has said his entire life that he had a transient childhood. He's not hidden this. He lived in a number of places. He went to dozens of primary schools. This is when you have these traumatic experiences and these formative experiences, they are part of why you care. It's how you develop your empathy. It's how you begin to care about other people and about the world around you, is because you have already experienced some kind of hurt yourself. Tortured Solster, you can have any opinion that you like in this world. I am fully in support of free speech, but I also have free speech to tell you when I believe you are circulating a talking point that has been seeded by intelligence agencies. And here is the proof. You can go to Twitter and you can write in Julian Assange cult, and you can press enter, and you can find hundreds of egg accounts, bot accounts, seeding Julian Assange was in a cult, Julian Assange was in a cult, Julian Assange was in a cult, all over the entire world, trying to convince people that Julian Assange was in a cult. So that's the evidence for you. Just as I happened across the self-imposed exile thing, you can do the same thing with Julian Assange is in a cult, and you will find it seeded all across the internet. This is J-Trig. That is J-Trig. If you go and read the Snowden J-Trig documents, that method of discrediting someone is precisely what they do. That is what they're tasked with doing. So if you can believe that, you're totally free to believe that. But you can also go and look at the evidence at where that is coming from. Yeah, it is defamation. Gian's saying it's absolutely defamation, complete and utter defamation. Some other defamation I saw in here, they say that WikiLeaks doesn't tackle Israel. But if you go and type Israel and press enter into WikiLeaks, there is hundreds of thousands of documents about Israel. There is meetings of Israeli diplomats with US diplomats, everything that they talked about from Cablegate, thousands of files about the Israeli government activities. It is ridiculous to say that WikiLeaks doesn't report on Israel when all you have to do is type Israel into wikileaks.org and press enter. Like, you know, researchers, targeted individuals have been targeted because they're smart. You are smart researchers. Go and do the research. Don't just listen to someone who says, WikiLeaks doesn't report on Israel. Go to wikileaks.org, type Israel and press enter. Read the documents and then think to yourself, would Israel like me reading this document about their diplomats' meetings with the US diplomats? No, Israel would not like that at all. And another point is 9/11. So here we go. That quote, Tortured Solster, that you're referring to from the Irish Examiner article from 7 years ago, is a misquote from a paragraph. When you read the entire paragraph, he was not discrediting 9/11. What he was saying is that he wished, instead of focusing on 9/11, that people would focus on the documented conspiracy theories that had been proven true in the WikiLeaks files. So he wasn't saying...
Oh, wow, that's a huge difference.
It's a massive difference. He was saying, rather than focus on what we don't know for sure, focus on what we have published on our website. That was the point of his comment. But they've taken this one line with the word 9/11. Now, you know what's really interesting about that is that 9/11 is yet another talking point that is used to discredit people. So 2 days ago, I wrote an article that went viral. It was trended #1 in Europe above the Hill and NBC News, and even it outstripped the whitehouse.gov website. And in that article, I completely blew apart the latest Dutch-Russia hacking scandal that's supposed to prove that Russia hacked the DNC.
Oh, right, the Steemit article.
Which it totally didn't, right? But instantly, what was the first thing that they did? They attacked me instead of attacking the content of my article. And when they attacked me, guess what they said? Guess what they did? They went through every interview I've ever done and they found the only singular reference to 9/11, where I said, I believe that there are people who have legitimate concerns about 9/11. I didn't make any other statement. That was all I said. And you can go and look at the top of my Twitter timeline right now and see me responding to the mainstream media journalist whose article I debunked, telling everybody that I am a 9/11 conspiracy theorist.
Oh my heavens.
I'll be back in 1 minute.
Yeah, I'm actually checking your Twitter feed now.
So 9/11 it's such a contentious topic that they capitalize on it to use it to discredit people. So they're trying to discredit my article by saying I'm a 9/11 conspiracy theorist because once in 7 years I mentioned 9/11 in an interview. Therefore, that's the thing. So they're doing the same thing with Assange. They're cherry picking the one time 7 years ago that he mentioned 9/11 and using it to discredit him. But the difference is the mainstream journalist discrediting me is trying to discredit me to mainstream journalists and politicians, because a big political leader in Netherlands had actually shared my article. Whereas these people in the truther community are attempting to spin it the other way and use 9/11 to discredit Julian to the truther community. So Julian is a targeted individual. That's the first thing that you have got to understand. He's not only a targeted individual, he is one of the most targeted individuals walking on the planet. So they, intelligence agencies, do not want the truther community or the targeted individual community or the pirates or the privacy activists or anybody else to support Julian or to support WikiLeaks. So what do? They tell you, oh, Julian's against 9/11. So just going back to that evidence, the documented evidence, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to go to Twitter search, go to advanced search. In the from account, put @WikiLeaks. And then in the keywords, put 9/11 and press enter. What you will find is 6 years of WikiLeaks. Yeah, I'm ranting good, Shelley, I know, because it drives me nuts that people don't do their research. It really does. So I'm going to tell you literally how to do it. Put from
thank you. This is huge.
Put from @WikiLeaks and put 9/11 in the keyword search term. And you will find 6 years of WikiLeaks releasing information that is in support of the 9/11 truth movement, because they have published information about Saudi connections to 9/11, Saudi funding of 9/11. They published the entire 9/11 pager transcripts from all of the EMS pager transcripts. Thousands of files on 9/11. Go to wikileaks.org, type 9/11 in and press enter. And that's how you will know what WikiLeaks thinks about 9/11. Don't listen to what some person says in chat WikiLeaks thinks about 9/11. Go to their actual website, go to their Twitter feed, find out for yourself what they think about 9/11. But don't listen to these silly little narratives that get spread around the world to try and discredit him, because that's just fake news.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a very good point, because, I've heard that story before, that Julian Assange doesn't really know the truth about 9/11, and he kind of discounts that it was an inside job, etc., from the truther community. So, yeah.
Give me 2 minutes. I'm just going to shut the door, go to the toilet really quick.
All right.
Yeah. I will, go back through the other 9 findings that are in that thing.
Thank you. You're spending a lot of time, which is a little bit extraordinary. So
you can have as much time from me as you want, because this is the truth and it's really important. And these are people that are suffering and paying the price every single day. And it's actually a sick irony that the intelligence agencies are successfully turning the truther community and the targeted individual community against Julian, because they are the same. They are the same. They're targeted just like him. They should be the ultimate solidarity for Julian. So it's a total perversion of truth and of how things should be, to have those communities turned against someone who is just like them and who is their best hope of getting these access to this verified documents, this information that is going to help. And after I've gone through those last Snowden files, we're going to get into directed energy weapons. Because
I would love to ask you about that.
WikiLeaks is the source for the military documents that I found and wrote about that verified all of the information about the existence of directed energy weapons. So that's
wonderful. Yeah,
that the targeted individual community must support WikiLeaks, because if it wasn't for WikiLeaks,
well, I think many do, Suzie. I think here and there you do hear of people who don't, but not everybody, you know, is of that bent of mind. So we look forward to hearing everything else, you know, that you can bring forward. So I'm just going to go back to the page that Suzie was actually sharing. I think that was on Steemit. I'm going to try to find it on my screen over here, because that list of findings that she's talking about from her Decipher You live streaming. Oh boy, I'm not finding it, so I'm going to have to find the right article. But in any case, she's got a an account on Steemit. So I think if you go to steemit.com and type in her name in the search button, search box, you'll find all of her articles. And she's got, I think this is it.
I just dropped you the link in chat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, if you want to read through those 9, I mean, they're pretty self-explanatory. Go for it. That would be a big help.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, you know, give it back to you so that you could go through, because you were talking about, you were going over them kind of briefly, but yeah, I'd be happy to read them out. Yeah, if that, yeah. So the top 10 findings from the series, right? We talked about the internal NSA resistance to 9/11 Commission and Senate Intelligence Committee's oversight. That was 1. And then 2 is all Osama bin Laden had to do to be undetectable by the NSA was use .pdf. Who knew? And 3, it takes a village to spy on the UN. And that's State Department, NSA, and CIA, to name a few. That should be really interesting, spying on the UN. Number 4 is the US considers the UN to be an arm of US foreign policy. And number 5 is NSA is literally planning a system of global control. They want their spying network to cover the entire globe. Number 6 is proof that the NSA started handing over entire databases of data to their customers, not just reports. And Suzie was talking about that a little while ago. Number 7, internally, NSA claimed credit for both Bush and Powell's bullshit Iraq war speeches at the UN. Very interesting. That I really would like to see spelled out in the documents. Frankly, there's so much that's over here that will be kind of mind-boggling to actually look at in the documents. Number 8, NSA wants to take its battlefield targeting alert system used to kill people in Iraq and in war zones and implement it globally. Now, I wonder if that battlefield targeting alert system has anything to do with directed energy weapons, which is a subject that I frequently cover. So that's something to ask Suzie. Number 9 is NSA has access to and control over the satellites and hardware of partner nations, which Suzie talked about. Also very interesting. And finally, number 10 is it's a total myth that the CIA and NSA are in competition with each other, or that Snowden didn't leak info about the CIA, DIA, etc. The documents paint the true picture. Now, that's fascinating. So it's truly extraordinary, Suzie, all of this.
I'm sorry, I just had to actually exchange my lighting source for a battery source for my laptop. So
Oh,
what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk you guys through the direct energy weapons findings, because I know that your target audience, really your biggest area of support, is in the TI community. And there have been many complaints that journalists will not cover directed energy weapons or what is happening to targeted individuals. Obviously, anyone who's seen my documentary knows that I am a targeted individual, and certainly was when I was in New Zealand. I say was in the sense that since I've been in Russia, I have not been physically subjected to the abuse and attacks that I was being subjected to in New Zealand.
that's excellent. I'm so glad to hear that.
And I'm attacked, my reputation is attacked in the same way, but I'm not physically subjected to the physical attacks that I was in New Zealand.
Wonderful.
So I wanted to, I mean, I'm not sure if when you asked me if I'd do this interview, if you thought that I was going to. The reason that I said yes is for several reasons. First, because I wanted to show the TI community that there are journalists who do care. And I could have thought to myself, oh, no, I must not be associated with people talking about conspiracy theories. But I think it's more important to show that journalists are prepared to be open-minded, and that there are journalists who have done this type of work on these types of topics, so that the TI community knows that they are not alone and that there are people who listen and do care. But my message to the TI community is twofold. First of all, you cannot sit and wait for other people to cover your situations. You have got to do it yourself. I'm a journalist because I had to become a journalist to get the information out. You guys have to become journalists to get your information out. I can sit here and talk about my experiences, what I went through, what I have learned, but I can't talk about your experiences. I can't talk about what you go through, and I can't talk about what you have learned. The second thing that I would teach you is how you will get from conspiracy theory to documented historical fact, is by not just talking about the emotional effects on you and things, which, I mean, it's important for people to understand, to have empathy that you're being hurt, but it's more important for you to find these documents that are already in the public record and to use those documents to support your case and to show people what is happening. Because when you can enter documents onto a court record, when you can give documents to reporters, this is exponentially more powerful than just giving them a narrative about your experience, right? So my documentary was powerful because I could back it up. Here's photos of my slashed car tire. Here's photos of my burned out car engine. Here's, social media tweets from the day it happened about what happened to me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This type of evidence is extremely, extremely important. Now, I'm going to show you guys the biggest gift that WikiLeaks has ever given to targeted individuals, which has gone under the radar for far too long. And yeah, I just want to say, I totally understand that to try and be a journalist and study documents and build a following and a platform when there are people literally trying to kill you is an incredibly difficult task, when it feels like you're being attacked on all fronts, when you're being undermined at every turn, where everything you do, they are electronically interfering with every other possible method of interference. I understand, because I've been there. I have been there. I did not have the resources of agencies. I had nothing. And every bit of reporting I did in spite of what they were doing to me. So somehow you've got to dig down inside yourself, even though you feel like you are literally, they're going to do you in any day now. You've got to find within yourself the will to do this work that I'm about to show you, and to circulate this information for your benefit and for the benefit of other people. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to share screen, and we're going to go to decipheryou.com. Now, Decipher You is one of the things I learned very early on is that I could not rely on any of my websites to stay up. So all of my original work published on a site called Occupy Savvy. It was my media team website. And because all of our work was on that one site, that site was getting constantly interfered with, the domain was constantly going down, et cetera, et cetera. So I learned to decentralize. So you'll find my work on a whole bunch of different platforms, because I learned I can never rely on a single domain or a single platform. So always decentralize your work. Save everything that you do in archive.org or in archive.is. You must have multiple links and references. When you write an article, save all of your source links in archive.org and publish the archive.org link on your article. Don't use the native link or the native domain of the website to the source, because otherwise it can be tampered with and taken down, and then your article's no good. Use the archive.org links.
That's brilliant.
So Decipher.you is a site I set up specifically for information that I'd found within the Snowden files, within the WikiLeaks files, and some reviews of field of vision content. So this is, I consider, one of the biggest findings I've ever made. It has never, ever been reported on by any other media, even though I wrote it several years ago. So we are looking at Hacking Team. This is from the Hacking Team leaks for WikiLeaks. Hacking Team is an Italian contracting agency, a hacking agency. Their customer list includes police agencies and intelligence agencies from around the world. Now, Hacking Team less lethal directed energy weapons tested and now operationally feasible. The existence, and this is my writing in red, the existence of directed energy and electronic weapons has long been considered conspiracy theory or science fiction. Yet emails linked, so we're going to open that link, from defense companies to the Italian mercenary hackers Hacking Team leaked to WikiLeaks. We're going to open that as well. Confirm that both directed energy weapons and electronic weapons do exist. We'll open that link. Not to be confused with laser weapons now in military use. They're in fact categorized less lethal. This doesn't mean they're not lethal. It means this is how they're marketed by the manufacturers as being less lethal, and or non-lethal weaponry specifically marketed to domestic law enforcement agencies. The weapons have been tested. The manufacturers admit they have been tested. The weapons are now operationally feasible for the first time. Bear in mind, we're not talking about now in 2018. We're talking about now in the emails themselves, which we will examine together in a minute, which is years ago. The emails include a comprehensive list of companies who manufacture the weapons, including companies who manufacture tasers and other law enforcement weapons, which means these weapons have been developed by the same suppliers of law enforcement and intelligence hardware as all the other weapons that are known about in the public sphere, like the beanie bag shotguns and the gas canisters and everything else. They're all coming from the same place. The emails include a comprehensive list of law enforcement agencies to whom the weapons are being marketed. So we know who's making them and who they're selling them to. The emails state that the weapons are being rolled out, delivered to customers in the period 2014-2024. So that means they were developed, manufactured, tested prior to 2014, but they are commercially landing on the doorsteps of the customers 2014 to 2024. The emails state that the weapons, weapons are classified as electronic warfare. Now, this will become very significant in a few minutes. In fact, I'm actually just going to quickly search up my most recent tweet about electronic warfare, and you'll see why it becomes significant. The mainstream has yet to acknowledge that such weaponry is in play. The reason for the restriction of the official information confirming the existence and deployment of these weapons to date appears to be money. So what I'm saying is money is how they've prevented the existence of these weapons from being known by the mainstream, and you're about to know why it's money. In the emails to Hacking Team, marketing company Vision Gain Defense offers to sell Hacking Team a business report. Company-wide access to that business report costs 7,000 British pounds or 8,800 euros for one document. When have you ever heard of a document costing 8,800 euros to read a document?
It's outrageous.
The reason it costs €8,800 is because the information that it contains is information that is not in the public sphere, that is not in the mainstream. And how they prevent it from getting into the mainstream is because if you can't spend €8,800 to buy this report, and if you aren't a registered law enforcement, security, or intelligence agency, it's not available to you anyway. So they use money. Money creates the barrier for the information. Those who have the money get the information. Those who don't have the money do not get the information. The teaser for the report content states, new developments in technology have made directed energy weapons operationally feasible for the first time. Though operationally feasible meaning law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies can actually use them in operations, which is separate from the defense manufacturers' testing programs, which occurs prior to the commercial side. Though recent pressures on defence and law enforcement budgets have placed a strain on research and development and acquisition budgets, the testing of new technology has shown good results. Isn't that sick? That is sick, and is likely to be further funded. So they will continue to fund research and testing of these weapons on human beings. Furthermore, the acquisition of non-lethal systems is likely to be given priority status by many law enforcement departments to deal with the increasing number of civil unrest situations. That means that directed energy weapons have been specifically developed for the anticipation of civil, or the anticipated civil unrest that is occurring worldwide as a result of massive global income inequality. This is how they intend to deal with the masses of humanity that have been left with nothing. This is the 1% plotting to control the 99%. The synopsis continues on to claim that it contains details of 202 contracts that have already been awarded for the supply of directed energy weapons and less lethal programs worldwide. It goes on to state that energy weapons testing continues, and alarmingly, that there is relatively low regulatory pressure for procurement. What that means, I'm just going to go on a little rant here for a second, so let's take this off. What that means is that there are no laws in place to control the buying and selling of these weapons because no one knows they exist yet, so there's no public pressure to regulate them or control them, and therefore at this time, being back in whenever this was written, which we'll see the exact date in a minute, at this time they were able to do whatever the hell, sell them to whoever they want, ship them to whoever they want. So they're telling their customers, get in quick now while there's no laws to control us. It's literally
I think you're right. Yeah, you know, some of this information I have had access to through military documents. As some of this information is contained in military documents, and also from some reports from the DOJ on crowd control technologies. Also from some UK documents that I've looked at. You know, crowd control technologies. But the thing that's really extraordinary that you're pointing out is the emails, the content of the emails, actually spelling out the lists of the law enforcement agencies to whom these weapons were marketed. I'd love to see that list. In fact, I'd love to report on it. I need to find out from you how to get there, because I'd like to report on this.
It's huge. It's huge because they name the manufacturers and they name the customers. That's absolutely huge. There are multiple further references to civil unrest in relation to the development of the weapons. So here we go. These are the programs. This is the list of programs that are employing this.
And this stuff, these section numbers are inside that report that you're talking about.
That report, which is contained in the WikiLeaks files, which you'll see shortly. So they've got the US Department of Defense, US non-lethal research and development programs, which are suspended, which are postponed, which are delayed, and which are in testing now. The United States non-lethal weapons market drivers and restraints, contracts and programs, Israeli non-lethal weapons market forecasts, Israeli national non-lethal weapons market overview, Israeli non-lethal weapons analysis. These are on WikiLeaks, so just have a think about this, everybody who says WikiLeaks doesn't publish about Israel. What you're reading right now, now tell me that WikiLeaks doesn't publish about Israel. De-emphasizing lethal force per civil.
This whole report is the whole report on WikiLeaks.
I'll take you through the source documents as soon as we finish this. It's not very long. It's only a short bit more, but it's important to go through. The Israeli directed energy weapon development, where are we? Now, Chinese non-lethal weapons market forecasts, market overview, and weapons analysis. So they've got this research. This is global. This is from the US to China to Israel. This is global. These people are all buying and selling together. This is not just like one political faction or another political faction. It's global. I said to you, right, how long ago? The militaries control the world. This is the evidence that the militaries control the world. And they're boasting about the fact there's no laws to stop them. According to Vision Gain, the leading companies involved with directed energy weapons programs, which presumably involves the development and testing of the weaponry, these are the manufacturers: BAE Systems PLC, which is British, isn't it? I'm pretty sure. Ball Corporation, the Boeing Company, so US, General Dynamics US, Kratos Defense and Security Solutions, Lockheed Martin Corporation, Northrop Grumman Corporation, and the Raytheon Company. Vision Gain names the companies supplying, so those are the manufacturers. Now we're into the suppliers. These are the people who buy from the manufacturers and sell to the commercial outlets. Vision Gain names the companies supplying the weaponry as being Aardvark Tactical, Brugge and Thomet AG, Condor Non-Lethal Technologies, Lampard Less Lethal Inc., Mace Security International. These are the people who make all of the current police-issued weapons. Non-Lethal Technologies Incorporated, Pepperball Technologies, the Safari Land Group, and Taser International Incorporated. Countless citizens, so the people who are behind the directed energy weapons, or the people who are making money off them, are the same people who make money off pepper spray and tasers and all the other horrible, torturous crap they've already developed. And the people making it are the same people who make bombs and airplanes and
grenades and missiles and...
Countless citizens worldwide have taken to their personal blogs and YouTube channels to talk about their experience of being targeted individuals, claiming that they have had such weaponry used upon them. To date, they have been discredited by psychologists who deride such claims as being the result of mental illness, which is the most common tactic, is that you report your experiences and they hospitalize you and call you crazy. But this document proves that it's been happening all along. To study reports of victims, web search targeted individuals, direct energy weapons. There are extensive resources, victim support groups, and countless first-hand accounts available online. So now we go to WikiLeaks. If you go to WikiLeaks and you search the hacking team release, that is this page here, and you search on directed energy, which is the search term that I use to find this.
Okay.
Then these are all of the emails that you get, the results that you get.
So you can go through and,
So you can yourself sit here and read about all these different forecasts and market reports. So you can see them, they're in reverse chronological order. So the most recent one was, this one, 24th of March 2015. But we're tracking back here through 2014. And you can read every single one. You can see, I mean, this is the thing. You want to tell me WikiLeaks is a limited hangout. They even publish the email addresses. They've even got the names of who's sending it to who and which company. This is from Vision Gain Defense, vgdefense.com, to hackingteam.it, which is the Italian hacking team company. And you can sit there and you can read all the way through it.
That's pretty
Directed
stunning.
energy, how Rhine Metal is making the impossible possible. Look at, how's that for a slogan?
Rhine Metal, interesting.
How's that? They're making the impossible possible.
Yeah, they do think they're gods, don't they?
As they continue to develop and test directed energy applications for military use. On and on and on it goes. So you can sit there and read through every single one. Battle space update, exhibitions. So that takes me to this. Remember how it said at the top that it was part of the electronic warfare program?
Oh, yes.
Guess who was placed in charge of the electronic warfare program?
Michael Hayden, huh? General Michael Hayden.
Let's move this down so you can see it properly. Including computer network attack and defense, psychological operations, military deception, electronic warfare, and operation security.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we looking at right now? We are looking at an NSA document from the Snowden files.
That's right. You know, they've also put it under information operations. They've got a lot of documents talking about information warfare and information operations, IO.
Psychological operations is a part of electronic warfare. That in itself is a major connector that connects two major things. It means that they aren't just studying the physical effects, they're studying the psychological effects. And it's the same people who are in charge of both elements of that. So there we go. So when you spend your time reading through WikiLeaks files like that, can you honestly sit here and tell me WikiLeaks is a limited hangout operation? Julian Assange is a limited hangout operation. WikiLeaks says nothing about Israel. Can you sit here and say these talking points to me with a straight face, having just studied and read what we have just read in the WikiLeaks files?
I guess there are people who say that, right? Yeah. I don't know who they are, but I think I've heard them.
Well, I've been seeing it. I saw it throughout the activist community and the particularly privacy and information activist community. There was a massive, massive push to make them, to discredit Julian, to discredit WikiLeaks. But recently, very recently, I have been seeing exactly the same narratives being seeded in the targeted individual community and in the truther community about WikiLeaks and Julian that I'd been seeing in the previous years seeded across the privacy and the information activist community. So these are talking points. WikiLeaks doesn't publish on Israel. WikiLeaks doesn't believe in 9/11. These are talking points that are seeded. They're seeded here, there, and everywhere to discredit them. But when you actually study the files, you learn the true story yourself.
That's absolutely fascinating. And I have to say, just looking at these files and looking at these emails, I mean, the question does arise, why has this not been covered at all? Even by alt media, you know, forget mainstream media. Of course, they're not going to touch any of this. They're too busy lying. But what about some of the other big alt media outfits, you know, the ones who do appreciate what WikiLeaks is finding? How come nobody's covered this?
That's a really good question.
When did you write this article, if you don't mind my asking? Do you have a date on it?
I wrote it in the middle of 2016. It's a year and a half old.
It's a year and a half old.
I wrote it a year and a half ago.
I would have certainly appreciated knowing about it. It just did not cross my desk.
We actually went through this. We went through this in one of our Decipher episodes because there was TIs in there also in the chat, and they were asking about directed energy weapons. And one of the TIs in the chat said, I have been waiting years for this. I have waited years of my life for the evidence that you are showing me right now.
Yeah, I do think it's pretty bombshell too. And, you know, maybe it's the same person who kind of sent links to all of us and said, check this out, check out this article. And I thought it had come out yesterday, you know, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, this is really interesting. And I went on the Vision Gain website, and you're right that that report is mentioned over there, and it's as expensive as ever. And obviously I can't, you know, go in and look at it. But I was looking at the WikiLeaks email references and thinking, okay, I need to figure out how to get into those emails. I'd like to read them.
It's really simple. And this is what we have to teach TIs, okay? You guys who are in chat, I'm not here to convince you that I'm real or that my story is real or that anything else or that WikiLeaks is real. You can work it out for yourself. All you have to do is go to WikiLeaks and type in keywords and read what comes up. You don't believe that they care about 9/11, type 9/11 and press enter. You don't believe that they report on Israel, type Israel and press enter. You know, you don't believe, and you think I might be a bit strange or a bit fishy or a bit suspicious, go and read my journalism. Go read the articles that I write, click on the source links and the documents that I use to evidence my writing. Read what I write. You don't have to like think I talk well or look good or something. These things are irrelevant. They're completely irrelevant. You don't have to believe what I tell you. Just yourself go to the website and find it out. The information is sitting there. WikiLeaks has 10 million documents. They don't know what's in there themselves. They can't read 10 million documents. We have to, of our own volition, read the documents and the files and find out what is in them. But believe me, once you've done that, you will read people saying stuff about WikiLeaks and you will just laugh at them. You'll just laugh because it's so ridiculous to say, you know, they don't care about Israel. Like, you'll just laugh. There's how many 100,000 documents? I mean, look, I'm just going to show you what I mean right now.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the most brilliant messages of this evening, Suzie, that you can present to everybody in the world, not just those who are being targeted. Pretty much anybody out there who can be a citizen journalist, right, today, by just going into the WikiLeaks.
Nothing I've done that other people can't do, honest to God. Okay, so I've just typed in Israel and I've pressed enter. And now I press search. And we get 343,029 documents just in the GI files, which is the Structure leak. We get 65,000 from the Plus D, 25,000 references from the Kissinger cable, 17,293 from Cablegate. This is the Chelsea Manning leaks of diplomatic cables. These 17,293 will nearly all be classified communications between diplomats. So there's a very high likelihood that this selection here will return specific classified information about Israeli diplomats. And on it goes. Nearly 5,000 just in Hacking Team emails, another 5,000 in the general search for Hacking Team. So Syria files, 2,051 results in relating to the Syria files. Podesta emails, 1,400 from the DNC leaks, another 1,200 from the Clinton emails. So this is what I mean by you'll laugh when you see this, and then you listen to people say WikiLeaks doesn't publish about Israel. Same thing about Russia. You type in Russia and press enter. There's like 700,000 results. 700,000 results.
This is absolutely stunning. I think you've just sort of empowered whole legions of journalists out there right now by just pointing to what they can do.
I really, really, really hope so, because this is really my message to you: is you guys can't rely on other people. It's no good to get on Twitter and yell at Chris Hayes, MSNBC, why aren't you covering this? You would be better off spending that 30 seconds reading a WikiLeaks document than you would be tweeting at Chris Hayes, because I'm telling you, Chris Hayes doesn't care. These people don't care. If they are not covering it, they either don't care or they can't care.
They can't care, exactly.
So you really need to assess, how are you spending your mental energy? You know, just yelling at other people. I understand people, the TIs are angry, that they're hurt, that they're lashing out. I totally understand it, but it doesn't advance their cause. To advance the cause, they must empower themselves through information. They must spread information.
That's brilliant. And you know, Suzie, that brings up, no, thank you for doing that. Thank you for taking us through all of it. But that really brings up the question, how did you get onto this? How did you start doing Decipher You? Did you just think about this yourself? You wanted to do something on your own? You wanted to kind of...
I had a niggling feeling for quite a long time that the documents that Snowden leaked might contain more information than what had been reported by the big outlets.
Great thinking.
And that kind of set on I was dealing with so much other stuff, it actually took me a really long time to actually get ahead and do it. I mean, the first batch, even now I still haven't finished them. We've only done four batches. I think we're on batch 5 now. We're about to begin batch 5 this week. It's not easy task to go through hundreds and hundreds of documents, but it's a really, really important one. And It has completely transformed the way that I see the world. It has changed absolutely everything.
And the Snowden files, where are you getting them again? Are you getting them from WikiLeaks?
No, the Snowden files are batch released by the Intercept. So, and this is a really interesting thing actually that people have not realized. Yes, the Intercept is funded by Pierre, who's a billionaire. Yes, Pierre has rotten, stinking connections to all kinds of nasty things. But if the Intercept, if Glenn was not legit, they would never have batch released these files that I'm using to find this information. The batch releases are a gift to the public. They're a gift. And when you read what is in these Snowden files, it is impossible to ever think that Snowden is not legit because the seriousness of what's in them. Just while we're debunking talking points that are used to discredit them, you hear all the time about Snowden. Well, he leaked documents on the NSA. He leaked documents on the NSA, but he didn't leak documents on the CIA. He didn't leak documents on the DIA. Therefore, he must be a CIA agent who is discrediting the NSA. Well, when we started reading through these documents, the first thing we discovered is that there's CIA information all the way through these documents. There is constant references to the CIA, there's constant references to DIA, to DOD, and to the Pentagon, DOD, Pentagon, and to the State Department. So it's completely nonsense to say that Snowden didn't leak information about CIA because it's all the way through the documents. The next thing we discovered is that there is a revolving door between the CIA and the NSA. So senior managers at CIA and NSA move back and forth between the agencies. So they are the same agent, and so do from low-level analysts to senior managers, they move back and forth between NSA and CIA. I mean, even Hayden was director of CIA and director of NSA. So it's basically the same group of people working at both agencies. So you can't leak on NSA without damaging CIA because they're so intertwined. The next thing we discovered is that they are operationally dependent. So the CIA gets the signals intelligence from the NSA, and then the CIA goes and does the ground operation based on what the NSA has given them. So they're using the same systems. They have customer supplier relationships that go both ways. Each is dependent on the other. The CIA and the NSA are the left hand and the right hand of the executive. So you can't hurt one hand without hurting the other hand. You know, if someone chops off,
interesting.
It still hurts your right hand. If someone chops off your right hand, it still hurts your left hand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a total myth that this only damaged NSA.
So you're saying that they're very entangled.
Completely. There's even documents, which if you go to Decipher You, you'll be able to see for yourself because they're all referenced. I've linked all the source documents and I've made
Great, wonderful. I will. Thank you.
All these points that I'm making to you now are straight off our findings from Decipher You. So we discovered that the CIA gives awards to NSA employees. There is something called the Denial and Deception Awards, where 100 NSA employees go to CIA to pick up their award that they've been given by CIA. So this is how interdependent. In the same document, there's a training reference where NSA staff are going to CIA and being for a training session, at which then DCI, Director of Central Intelligence, George Tenet, was speaking. So the NSA is being trained at CIA. They're getting awards from the CIA, and the staff are moving back and forth between NSA and CIA, and then they're working on the same operations together. So it's a complete myth that Snowden didn't leak on CIA. It's a myth that NSA was, I mean, people say crazy. They say shit they get out of the movies, honestly. If you look at the Hollywood movies, it's always like one agency has it in for the other agency.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's the general myth. Yeah.
It's bullshit. They work together. They have like this life cycle. It's like cohesive. They're like a living organism. They move from like,
oh my gosh,
this point to this point to this point to this point.
They feed on each other.
The information flow, it moves in and out, the intelligence moves in and out of each agency to the next agency. They're all codependent, they're all interrelated.
Amazing. So that's quite extraordinary, all of the information that's coming out of your Decipher You project, and I know there's several other projects that you did, and you've got separate websites for those, Contraspin, the Anti-Spy Bill. I think you did a whole bunch of interviews with various people, right, on the
Yeah, so
Anti-Spy
the
Bill?
anti-spy bill, sorry, I've really not got to talk about Internet Party at all. Anti-spy bill is a series that we did with Internet Party last year where we took some of the top whistleblowers and intelligence-related journalists and people around the world, and we brought them onto a roundtable project to talk about their experiences and general issues, but specifically in the context of to craft crowdsourced citizen-initiated legislation to counter these problems, to counter the targeting of citizens by intelligence agencies. And Fly or Someone Awesome is probably, Fly's currently trolling.
Oh.
Saying, no, don't go on CNN. We're saying, why are you subjecting me to this? Like Elizabeth Beck. It's very funny.
Oh.
Fly, if you could give people the link to the anti-spy bill, I'm not, maybe Cockatoo will have it, the anti-spy bill draft of the legislation that we did. You can read through the different points that we want to table to the Parliament and ask them to push through to protect civilians from this malicious attention and targeting by intelligence, private and public intelligence agencies.
Mm-hmm. I think that's brilliant. What's the status of that?
We're actually running a second series this year. The official announcements haven't gone out yet, so I'm probably
brilliant. Yeah, I think that sort of has to sweep the world. I think, not just New Zealand.
Yeah, we've teamed up with Pirate Parties International, and there's already like a Canadian version being developed, and other people are very, very interested in this project.
Oh, so that's fabulous. Yeah, and that's the other big question. I mean, how did you get into politics ultimately? How did you get into the Internet Party?
I supported Internet Party in 2014, and I interviewed the previous leader, Laila Hare, on a number of occasions, including quite famously at the Moment of Truth event after Snowden and Assange had spoken.
I saw that, yeah.
Laila, oh, you did. It's quite an amazing interview because I managed to capture in my gonzo citizen journalist kind of way the mainstream media setting up Kim and setting up Glenn Greenwald. So they were running an disinfo op to try to discredit Snowden's revelations about mass surveillance. I mean, yet again, this is like piece of evidence number 500 that Snowden is legit, is that when he tried to tell New Zealanders what was going on at Moment of Truth, the entire National Press Corps united to smear him, smear Greenwald, smear Assange and Snowden. So that's just, this is what they do. This is how
You're used to it at this point. You've seen it happening for a long time.
I've seen it 1,000 times, but that was a special occasion because I actually caught them on camera doing it. So then after they ran their whole info op nationwide to tell everyone, don't worry, there's actually nothing wrong, there was nothing to talk about, I was able to say, yes, there was stuff to talk about, and here's what the media did, and here's the video of them doing it. So that was a really, really good one.
It's pretty stunning that you could talk to her. So you're saying that after you started interviewing her in particular, she
was just wonderful and generous to me and amazingly supportive. She's a beautiful person. She's a real people's person. She's from a unionist background. She's very labor-oriented, very people-oriented, and a hardcore feminist as well. And but a good hardcore feminist, not a crazy hardcore feminist.
Right. Oh, good. Yeah. Important distinction.
In the sense of like a suffragette type feminist, like that kind of real old school feminist. And she, in her first speech as leader of Internet Party, gave this amazing inspirational talk about how she wanted her legacy to be that women were not afraid to stand up and own their political opinions and to move into the political sphere and take their place. And when it was first suggested to me that I stand as leader in beginning of 2017, I spat my vegetable soup all over my kitchen table. Like eating soup, and then we think that you should be the leader of the party. And I was like, everywhere, soup flying and every time. I was like, me? Have you lost your minds? What are you talking about? What? Me of every person in the world. But then I clicked and I realized if I am leader, It was the most genius strategic move ever to make me leader. Because if I am leader, it forces the media to confront me in my situation.
That's very, very true.
They can no longer hide it. And they knew that I would push the issues back onto the agenda that the Internet Party was formed to confront, which is the surveillance issues, the surveillance abuses, the privacy issues, which is precisely what I spent my entire year then doing. So it was the ultimate smack in the face to the establishment for me to be declared leader. But it was really listening to that speech by Lila, going back and revisiting it, and realizing it comes back to that obligation factor again. Like, I hate politics. I think it's reality TV. I am a politician as an act of protest against public politics. I'm not a politician at all because I want to actually be sitting in a seat of power. I'm there because I want to rebel against it for righteous reasons, righteous indignation again. But when I watched that video and I realized this is exactly what she's talking about, the next generation of women standing up and taking responsibility for their political opinions and acting for change. And so that was what made me say yes, ultimately.
Yeah, that you do make a great argument for people generally who can see what's wrong and who try to make some difference in their communities, but who can't go very far. You make an argument for people like that who are already interested, already motivated, to actually step forward a little bit further and enter that arena of politics, which most people have, up to this point balked at. But look at what we are faced with. So it's almost like if you want to change the system, you've got to enter the system, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's true. I also felt a bit of an obligation because I am somewhat protected by being at length from the agencies. Like I said, they can still attack me digitally, they can still smear me through the media, they can still do whatever, but I at least have been physically safe here. And so I did also feel that side of it because Kim is still being targeted. They've still done very nasty things in the last year, trying to get rid of his kids' nannies, trying to deport his kids' nannies. Two of his children are autistic and are very attached to their nanny. This is the kind of underhanded thing they've done. They got caught spying on him again, putting surveillance cameras in opposite his apartment door in his house and everything else. And so it just made a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And of course, I have a background in IT, so I had the technical chops to be able to explain to the public in non-technical ways technical concepts that are part of the core premises of a party. So I've exploited all of my knowledge base to the best of my ability for the benefit of the party and for the benefit of the people.
That's pretty brilliant. And that actually brings me to that final point that I wanted to make, that you are so tech savvy. And even as a journalist, I think you're kind of leading the way and kind of showing people, how they can better use social media and so forth. As for instance, with Steemit, which you were tweeting about today, right?
I'm not a coder. I've done some minor low-level coding in the past, but I'm not a developer. I'm not a technologist in that sense, but I have really good knowledge about practices, methods, and processes. I have the more big picture because I was managing projects, so I can see the kind of the bigger picture of it, and that has helped me a lot with pardon me. Sorry, we've all had flu this week.
No, sorry.
That has allowed me to quite easily interpret most of the management level NSA documents because that's the level that I'm used to reading at. Some of the super technical stuff in those files still goes straight over my head. I can read the technical release notes for programs and understand them, but I don't understand stuff about space and satellites, and I'm sure there's a lot of content in those documents that I have not been able to address, and someone who has different areas of expertise would be able to go over those same documents that I've studied and find even more stuff. So it's another reason that it's important for people of all different backgrounds to study the documents, because you will probably still find things that I did not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wow, Suzie.
there's been people asking questions constantly, and I feel really bad that I've actually pretty much ignored them all. So I'm sorry, and Fly's saying they should tag me. The chat's moved so fast, I'm a bit behind. So why don't you guys just please ask questions now if you have them, and I'm happy to answer anything that you want to ask me, and then we'll wrap it up before I lose my voice.
Yeah, I was going to wrap it up right away, but if you wanted to wait for a couple of questions, go ahead. Yeah. Because, I wanted to say, first of all, Suzie, thank you, because what you've done here today, this has been an extraordinary evening. It's well surpassed our intentions, I think, and our plans for this evening. I had just thought, it's going to be a 45-minute chat about your work, but obviously your work is extensive. And the second thing is you took the time to go into detail on your discoveries with your current Decipher You project, which I think is so immense, which will make this video worth watching for pretty much anybody watching it. And then the third thing that you did was you especially addressed those who are targeted, and you offered us tools, to go into WikiLeaks and do a lot more research on our own. So everyone who's targeted, for whom I also speak, because as you know, I'm targeted as well, and whose stories I attempt to cover, I think everyone who's targeted will indeed appreciate this hugely. So I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending so much time and going through so many areas tonight.
You are totally welcome. It's all I can give you. I mean, the reality is all I can give you is my time and my knowledge that I've, whatever I've learned in the last 6 years. I chose to make myself as accessible as I possibly could to people. Fly can give you the Internet Party Discord server. You can come chat to us 24 hours a day if you want to. There's people there. That was a choice on my part. I could have been like, I'm a target, I'm aloof, and I'm staying away because anyone could attack me. And for a long time, I did feel like that, especially in New Zealand with the links that were being gone to penetrate my circles. But I realized that actually does a disservice to the people who it can mean a lot to have some basic human contact from somebody who understands and who cares. And I talk at the end of my documentary about the importance of community and how it can be the difference between them driving you nuts and you staying sane, just to have some form of contact with someone. And I can't handhold every single person who comes my way. Obviously, I have a life and other things. I have a family and things I have to deal with as well, and a huge workload. But I can provide a platform if you just want some human interaction with other people, you want to be able to discuss topics, you want to be able to share news, go for it. So just reach out to any of our guys or send me a tweet on Twitter or whatever, and I will do. I can't promise you anything. You're going to have to do it yourself, a lot of it. You're going to have to do the work and the research. You're going to have to put the time and effort in yourself, but I can promise you at least that we do actually give a shit about every single person out there who's being targeted. Whether or not we can personally help, we can give you at least somewhere where you can talk to people. I know you do exactly the same thing with your own group as well.
Oh, absolutely.
You look like you're going to cry. Are you all right?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, it's just late. I'm probably falling asleep, but no offense. No, I'm not going to cry. But but Suzie, that is very moving because, frankly, what you're talking about is reaching out to community, and that's very important. And I have exactly the same thinking on that score as you. And because I do know there are so many people who are targeted, and there are people, and the things that you've talked about in your documentary about how badly people's lives are being assaulted, people are being isolated, socially isolated as well, and being blacklisted in their employment space as well.
This is psychological operations that we just read about in the electronic warfare, is to isolate you, to make you despair. And yeah, please don't, because if you can break that, if you can actually just, despite the physical attacks and the horrific things that are happening to you, if you can break out of that despair and just connect with anyone in the world that will be an ear for you, that can be enough it can be the difference literally between life and death. I understand that. I really do.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
I'll just quickly turn to the questions because now there's a lot of questions.
Oh, really? Oh my goodness. Yeah, feel free.
I'll probably just give you guys like a couple of sentences each. I'm sorry, because I think, I don't know if you can see, my nose is actually dribbling down my face, like literally. So
As elegant as ever.
Okay. Featherlight says, Suzie, I emailed you. I've been waiting for a reply. Feather, I am freaking terrible at email. Of any form of communication, email is the hardest way to get hold of me because I get so many all the time. I have dozens of people reaching out to me constantly about this stuff. Your much better bet is to send me a tweet. Tweet's probably the fastest in terms of time frame for a reply. My DMs are open. You can DM me, but even then, I do get a ton of, unsolicited DMs a day as well. If I don't get back to you, it's not personal at all. I'm doing my best to answer everyone I can. So then your second best bet would be to contact someone like Fly, who's primal_species on Twitter, or contact Romola, contact anyone. Jump on the Discord server. We'll talk to the people who are there. There's over 100 people in there, and they're generally very, very nice people. I can't actually think of anyone in there who's not a nice person. So just be aware of that, okay? It's not personal if I haven't gone back to you. Oh, some very nice comments too. Right. Oh, thank you. Bitcoin donations are gratefully received because the lengths that they have gone to starve me out. I mean, they've literally tried to starve me out.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. For years, constant tampering with my bank accounts, my freezing money transactions, everything. Cards getting turned off every 5 seconds, and you name it, they've done it to me, and I'm constantly under massive financial pressure. So any donations are gratefully received. Thank you very much, but don't feel pressured to donate if it's outside your ability, honestly. Someone's asking, did I research anything on synthetic telepathy? To be honest, I know absolutely nothing about synthetic telepathy. I know some things that some other people have said, but in terms of documented evidence, I don't know anything about it. I want you guys to understand that, because another big discrediting thing they do is they say, well, she mentioned this, but she didn't mention that. Well, she mentioned that, but she didn't mention the other thing. That doesn't mean that this or that or the other thing isn't, that I'm,
no, Suzie, I don't even think you need to address that, because frankly, look at the work you do. It's so incredible. The amount of work you do.
I can talk about what I know, what I've experienced, what I've read.
Absolutely.
But there's a million topics that I don't know anything about and I can't talk about. And that's not a judgment call on those topics or the people who are involved in those topics. It just means it's not in my field of experience.
Right.
So sorry about that. I don't know anything about that at all. Tortured Solster, will you promise not to yell at me? If so, I won't yell at you. If I get a bit boisterous, it's because I care about the topic. I'm not actually yelling at you. It's because I know that Julian is suffering horrendous, sick, nasty, hideous, unfair, malicious things every single day. And the reason I am a nose-dripping activist is because I care about people. I genuinely care. I wish that nobody was getting hurt. I wish no one was getting bombed. I wish that everybody was literally okay physically, emotionally, and mentally. And I can't do much to save the world, but I can try, just do my little piece. So if I get emphatic about my point, it's actually not a judgment of you at all. Okay, it's truly not. You're entitled to your opinion. It's just because I know that there's someone suffering, and when I see them suffering and then I hear people saying things that I know aren't true about them, or making their life worse, or hurting their reputation more than the mainstream media already is, then that really it is like a trigger for me, because I don't like seeing victims being further victimized, whether people mean to do it or not. So that's all. I'm just speaking. If you go and read back through my historical work, you'll see a lot of my work is in writing in defense. I don't attack people. I write in defense of people, of good people who I know are doing important stuff. Back to your actual question. If so, please delve into how WikiLeaks got onto mainstream media. That is a very fascinating question, because that will lead you down the path of, yet again, why WikiLeaks is legitimate. WikiLeaks has been screwed over by every major media organisation in the world. The Guardian published decryption keys to WikiLeaks files, literally published them in a book, which WikiLeaks was then accused of endangering sources over. if you hear all of this nonsense about WikiLeaks didn't publish evidence of Russian VTB Bank transferring or receiving $2 billion from some Syrian thing that wasn't in the Syrian files, that whole shebang tracks back to FBI informant Hector Sabu Monsegur. There's absolutely zero proof that the documents that FBI informant says ever existed. All WikiLeaks emails are cryptographically verified. There's been no headers for the emails that he says, that the FBI guy says were taken out of the files. They've never provided the header information for those emails. There's been no way to verify whether or not they even existed. So there's so much disinformation circulated about them. Now, WikiLeaks was initially brought into the media fold for collateral murder for the same reason that Snowden was brought into the media fold, as I discussed earlier in this episode. Collateral murder and the Manning releases were going to go around the world anyway. And at the point at which the media realizes they're on the back foot, they try to catch up. They try to catch up to save their own credibility. And once they feel like they're involved and caught up, and WikiLeaks, the WikiLeaks commits to getting, they literally say it on their website, they commit to getting the maximum possible exposure for the information that their sources have risked their life for. So WikiLeaks agreed to work with mainstream media to maximize that exposure. And they got burned across the board. Just like New York Times burned them. It just came out a couple of weeks ago. WikiLeaks tweeted out the proof from the DNC files that a New York Times reporter was actually leaking the WikiLeaks publication schedule and what they were leaking on, what Manning's leaks were, the publication schedule for those leaks, to Hillary Clinton at the State Department when she was Secretary of State. So the mainstream media were acting as agents, saboteurs, informants when they worked with WikiLeaks and leaking that information back to the US government. So you will notice that the entire mainstream media have been kicking the shit out of Assange and WikiLeaks for years now and hate WikiLeaks guts, hate them. I have a big article coming out about Julian very soon. I've been working on it for 3 months. It will contain, there will be some information that's relevant to some of these topics that we're discussing in that. Brilliant. So that is how WikiLeaks got onto mainstream media, because WikiLeaks became so big of their own accord that they couldn't be ignored. And as soon as you hit that can't be ignored part, that's when they try to co-opt you. And they tried to co-opt WikiLeaks and they failed. They tried to get WikiLeaks to play ball with redactions, to do things the way that the mainstream media works, and WikiLeaks said no. They partially redacted Afghanistan files purely for the informant side to literally save lives. They were convinced to make those partial redactions, but they wouldn't go any further than that. So they were rejected and betrayed by the mainstream media establishment and have been smeared by them ever since. Ever since. Never forget that when the woman that Julian supposedly raped said that he didn't rape them and that the police made up the charges, that's the direct quote from the girl involved. Never forget that within hours of those, they weren't even charges, but hours of that happening at the police station, the entire world media reported on the rape investigation simultaneously. The entire world media. Now, I've worked with rape survivors for years. I am a rape survivor. I've written about this extensively in my past, and some of my activism has been related to this as well. I can tell you right now, there is no rapist in this world who the entire world media reports on being a rapist within hours of a complaint having been filed at a police station. There is none. None.
That's a very, very good point.
The only way that would happen is if it is a deliberate information op that has been pre-planned and pre-coordinated by the agencies. So
information warfare at its finest.
And he asks how certain whistleblowers are covered by the mainstream while at the same time Obama tightened the laws. The only real massive saturation whistleblowers in the mainstream that I can think of would be Daniel Ellsberg. And that would have been due to Nixon, the resignation, Watergate, all of that stuff. I mean, that was a big deal. It took down a president. So that really answers that question. And I mean, Ellsberg, like I hear some people say, oh, Ellsberg is CIA because he worked at the embassy in Vietnam and he blah, 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 blah. First of all, Ellsberg said he was CIA. The fact that he was CIA actually had nothing to do with anything whatsoever. Yes, he was stationed at the embassy in Vietnam doing that. That doesn't mean he didn't have a crisis of conscience when he realized that they were napalming 3 million people to death and decided to leak the documents. And that's what whistleblowing is. Whistleblowing is when someone is on the inside and they take that information to the outside. To be on the inside, you have to be a CIA agent or an FBI to get access to that information in the first place. Either you're on the inside and you whistleblow, or you like hack it or something and leak it or whatever. These are the only ways that information can make it from the classified networks to other, outside. So if Ellsberg hadn't been CIA, he never, or whatever, or at Rand and everything he was, he never would have even had his eyes on the information to understand the importance of it. The information is restricted, just as we talked about, restricted by money in the commercial space. It's restricted by clearance level within the agencies. Him and who else? Manning went to jail for 7 years and was tortured. So I'm not surprised that got Manning into, the mainstream media. I mean, it's pretty obvious when you have something that's of that significance and has that level of attention, then of course it's going to be in the mainstream. But you're correct that most whistleblowers are suppressed by the mainstream or discredited or smeared by the mainstream. But you've got to understand that when the mainstream starts to promote them, it's because they have no choice.
I think that's right. And even with Manning, I mean, if you look back on the history of, how she was reported in the media, it was because of the efforts of various people outside. It wasn't just, the articles didn't just pop up.
Exactly. And that's the point that I was trying to make about Snowden, is the same thing, that it wasn't until it was in the media's best interest to promote
exactly
that they promote Snowden. Same thing with all these whistleblowers. If it's not in the media's interest to do it, they will not do it.
They won't touch it.
They have no choice anymore. Then they will be like, oh, we were on the side all along, we always cared. No, they didn't care. No, they would have put the boot and they would have dug the grave for that person quite happily. But at the point at which there's so much public attention or so much information being circulated anyway, they've got to get on board and pretend that they're actually journalists for 5 minutes, until they can work out how to control the situation. That's the reality of how it is. Okay, so no, the nose drip isn't DEWs. I can tell you that for free. It's literally a cold. Like we've had it one after the other in my household. It's just because of the weather. I've lost my place with the questions, but I know there's more. So, oh God, can I control F in this thing? The other thing about Ellsberg, I see someone else commenting on what I'm saying about Ellsberg. Ellsberg is now in his, 88, 90s, I think.
Oh,
and he is still traveling the world, warning people about nuclear weapons and the threat of nuclear war.
Hasn't he heard about EMF weapons?
If he was a CIA disinformation limited hangout, he would have his feet up in Cape Cod in his holiday house for the last 20 years. He wouldn't be doing anything. These people retire.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Like they do their 35 years and then they retire on Cape Cod. They do not travel around the world when they're 90 and on death's doorstep warning people against nuclear war. So that's the other thing I'd say about Ellsberg, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Well, people are very interested in your links. So what I can do is post all the links that, we've been looking at over here. And also that WikiLeaks site that you had.
People saying some really nice things to us. Thank you so much. Dude, guys, we're just telling the truth. That's it. We just
but
this is what we learn. This is what we know. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Well, you see, this is what makes you so extraordinary, Suzie, because as you know, there are journalists out there who are sort of playing the game. They're sort of inside the world, either of mainstream media or they're sort of in the alt media space, but they appear to be still propped up by mainstream media. So it's very rare to find journalists who are simply working with the truth.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at some of the very cute comments. Someone told me to drink some more soup, but don't spit it out this time.
Good advice.
Sorry, I know I've missed lots of questions. Can you guys please Can you please just ask again? Because the chat's moving so fast that it's just completely leaving me behind, to be honest with
Yeah, now can we
you.
actually get a copy of the chat, like when we're done?
Yeah, that'd be cool. Someone said, at any point has my family been targeted or individuals involved in my targeting? Oh, has my family been targeted or involved in my targeting? There's a couple of things. First of all, not everything about me, because I'm still involved in the asylum process. I haven't been granted asylum. I've applied for asylum. There are a number of factors involved in my situation that are not public at this time that I just simply can't talk about. The other thing is that I tend not to talk about my family for their own protection, because it's actually really unfair to my family. Like, they didn't ask for any of this. They didn't make any of the choices that I made. And I'm really conscious of the fact that, yes, there's been, I mean, their daughter, niece, their granddaughter, their whatever, is living in exile, and their grandkids on the opposite side of the planet. They don't get to see me. They don't get to touch me. They don't get there's been, I don't like to get into the whole like price I've paid stuff, to be honest with you, because then I just actually will start getting upset. But it has not been easy on the people that had to watch me go through this. I had a question, someone yesterday was telling, oh, you're an agent, blah, 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 blah. You convince me to believe you. And I said, I actually don't care, like, if some stranger believes me or not, because my family and friends went through this with me every day for years, saw what was happening to me. My entire social circle saw what was happening to me. All the activists I work with saw what was happening to me. I don't need to prove it to anyone. Whether or not someone believes me can't take away the fact that it happened. So I'm not here to like convince people or whatever, but yeah, I tend to just keep away from the family stuff, because it's just not fair to them to be talked about in some live stream somewhere somehow, you know. I can tell you that there was interference at my children's schools. There was interference in the community of the school. And
Oh my goodness.
there was people who I'd known for years, who one day all of a sudden looked at me like I'm some monster child molester, drug smuggler, something.
Suzie, I've experienced the exact same thing. And, you know, I know many who have.
Yeah. And you're
overnight.
Just like, what the hell's going on? Like, I've known you for years, and now they can't look you in the eye. They can't look you in the eye. Like, from one day being totally like close to you and having a great relationship with you, to the next day being like you're some alien from outer space, you know.
And then they start lying to you.
Yeah, and then exactly, because they're not allowed to tell you whatever it is they've been told by whoever, and blah, blah, blah. So I went through all of that. I went through in the activist circles when I was first getting interviews with prominent politicians, other journalists and people. I would go to an event and there would be agents who would go to every single speaker there and say, don't talk to Suzie, she's a cop. Don't let Suzie interview you, she's a cop. She will leak her footage. I can't even keep a straight face. They'd say she will leak her footage to the cops. All of my footage was live. I live tweeted and live did everything. I released live. The whole planet could see it. But they would say she's doing it for the cops. And in the meantime, I would have actual police officers showing up on my doorstep with bullshit reasons to try and interview me, try and interrogate me, try and destabilize my life. At the same time, I've got people running around telling everyone I'm a cop. You know, this is the like, you're screwed either way. You know, it's like
unbelievable.
I faced that for years. I had that for years. I've been smeared so many times I can't even count it anymore. There are blogs that you can read that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that you are offering as an antidote to all of that incredible defamation, you know, libeling and smearing and slandering, is simply go public. Record everything, document everything, put it out there, live cast everything, live tweet everything. You know, that's the inverse of what these people are trying to do, right? They're trying to build up stories around you, and you're kind of stopping that.
I'm not particularly religious, but I just give it to God. Like, if somebody acts weird to me now, I just go, okay, and move on. Like, the people that genuinely love me and care about me are with me, you know, not physically with me, but they're on my side, they're on my team, they're with me. And they can't be They can't be dissuaded. They can't be lied to. They, no smear that you go and tell my friends now, they're never going to believe in a million years, because they know me. They know my situation. They know.
It's wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful to have friends, to have a community.
Carry it with you. But that's what I'm trying to say. You don't carry it with you, because it's not your fault. You can't control whatever's saying about you. You can't control that. Don't carry it with you. That's other people's bad karma to.
Absolutely.
Tortured Solster, are you still able to earn a living as a journalist? Well, I never did earn a living as a journalist, is the answer to that, because I did it all for free. No one was paying me.
Oh my God, you sound exactly like me.
I had a day job that was in IT that was just completely separate from my activism work. I think I didn't get donated a single dollar as an activist until maybe even 2015. I think after I left New Zealand. I don't think I ever got.
Wow. Do you have a Patreon page, Suzie?
Decipher has a Patreon page.
Decipher.
Excuse me. Decipher has a Patreon page, which I'm sure Fly will put up there. But
great. So that would be a great way for people who are watching to support Suzie's work, because I think she definitely needs to be supported. Just take a look at her work, start reading her work. And of course, if you've been watching this interview, I don't think I need to sell you on that.
So recently I've started posting on Steemit, which in theory will give me some kind of going forward income. If you get a Steemit account and you upvote my posts on Steemit, then I get paid some money, and that's the way you can donate to me without actually having to pay yourself, just out of a couple of
Steemit sounds fantastic.
It's fantastic, yeah. I, in theory, will be paid by Internet Party. Last year I earned less than, my total income last year was less than the unemployment benefit would have been in New Zealand if I was just unemployed and on government income.
Oh no.
In theory, Internet Party will pay me, but Internet Party has to raise funds first, and Internet Party has been a targeted organisation for the last 4 years. It was founded by Kim.com, who is a targeted person. All of his money was seized by the government, all his funds frozen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what they do. They go after the resources. If you are legit and you do this work, they will go after all your resources. So the generosity of family and friends is the only thing that has kept me alive and will continue to do so. So if you guys want to contribute, that is not why I'm here, but you're welcome to do so. That would be very cool.
Yes, I'll put a little note below the video, Suzie. Support Suzie on Steemit. Yeah.
So honestly, if it was about money, I never would have left my IT job, and I never would have done anything I've done in the last 4 years, but that's just it. Am I aware of NGOs that compromise and ignore these crimes? The NGOs, to survive, have got to walk a line between human rights and government priorities. So the NGOs can do good work in some areas that are not threatening to the government, but they will not stand. It's a similar situation to the media, okay? If a whistleblower's case breaks internationally like Snowden's did, then Human Rights Watch and Amnesty and everybody else will jump on board Snowden's case. The reason for that is because if they don't, the veil is lifted and they're shown up for not actually caring about human rights. But if Snowden's case hadn't broken internationally and he didn't have the support of Glenn and others, they probably would have let him die without even blinking, because they do not actually care about asylum seekers from the West. They do not. Nobody wants to admit that asylum seekers from the West even exist. We're only allowed to know about.
That's a very good point, actually. In fact, that's a great focus for an article. Asylum seekers from the West aren't focused on, and even political refugees from the West are not focused on.
Of course. And journalists who have been killed in the West, suicides, car accidents,
sudden strokes, heart attacks.
Right. But any journalist who dies in Russia is state-sponsored assassination, blah, 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 blah. And this is how they make the statistics. Like the Reporters Without Borders statistics will tell you every journalist that has ever died in a third world country, or a country that is hostile to the United States or an adversary of the United States. They will not register Serena Shim's death, Michael Hastings' death, Gary Webb's death. If I died, they wouldn't register my death. No.
This is Serena Shim.
How they operate. They whitewash the Western world on the statistics. The statistics are all cooked. They will not admit that journalists are targeted and killed in the West, only in the countries that it suits them to admit that it happens in.
Yeah, and that's something that's sort of achieved by a conglomerate of mainstream media plus some of the big human rights groups. So.
Okay, I didn't even realize that we've gone for so many hours. Are there any last questions, you guys? I'm sorry, I know I've missed like 50 questions. I just keep answering the ones that I see like pop up at any minute, because I'm going to have to get some rest. I've actually got a Decipher You stream tomorrow, and then I'm on H.A. Goodman the next day. So I've got 2 more late night interview sessions ahead of me in the near future.
Oh my goodness. And I should point out to everybody in the world who's watching, I mean, Suzie is doing all this on everybody else's time and not her own, because it's really sort of, it started out being very early in the morning there for you, right? 4 a.m. or something.
There's the one coming in now, I think.
Yeah. No,
that light behind me is the dawn.
So I really appreciate that you've come over here and you've spent so much time and you've offered so much information, Suzie. This is extraordinary. And I guess what I would like to ask you is, do you want to leave people with, information on your website, where they can support you, how they can reach you, if people want to reach you? And we'll close.
Just at SUZI number 3D, or I would say New Zealand SUZI number 3D on Twitter. And from there you can find my website and everything else. This is, for me, I didn't do this for self-promotion. I did this because I wanted to show you guys that people actually do care about TIs. I wanted to talk to the TI community about the fact that there is a mountain of evidence that people that you're being taught to hate are actually legitimate. And you guys are people who they teach others to hate, but you're legitimate. That's the same as Snowden and the same as Assange. They are people that others are taught to hate, that are actually legitimate. So stop being convinced to hate our heroes based on false premises that are easily disprovable with a little bit of work. So I wanted you to know that the truth is out there. You can find it. It's in the documents. It's in the leaks. It's in the files. Go and read them. Don't listen to what anyone else says. Don't even listen to what I say, but just go and read them yourself. That's it for me. And the other thing is, I want to tell you, there was one more reason that I said yes to you. And that was because I looked at your other interviews and you have approached every single interview with empathy. And empathy is the driving force. Empathy is why Julian started WikiLeaks. Empathy, he wants to end wars. He wants to publish documents that end wars. He genuinely cares about people losing their lives. And he genuinely has put his life on the line to try and stop that happening. Manning did the same thing. Manning, there's an amazing passage from Manning where she talks about how she was watching targets through the military systems in Iraq and how she would try to help them because she recognized that they were good people and that they didn't deserve to be in this position. Support the people who have given their lives for this cause. That's all I've got to say.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I should correct one possible misconception that may be floating about over here. I support Assange wholeheartedly. So, and Snowden.
Please understand, I'm not at all directing that at you personally.
Okay, I just wanted to clear that up before we close.
I'll give you some context. Recently, I joined a truther community group. And in that group, I was amazed to discover this constant churn of anti-Assange, anti-Snowden, anti-whistleblower, anti-WikiLeaks, et cetera. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize you guys are actually being targeted with this disinfo, constantly. And then I realized, oh, of course, because you're the natural allies. They are targets. Snowden is a target. They want to kill him.
That's a very good point. Yeah, actually.
And then I realized, you guys are natural allies, and that's why they are trying to stop you from supporting them, because they try to break up. They do it with the whistleblowers, and a lot of people don't realize this, but there's been a massive effort to make Manning hate Assange, to make Jeremy Hammond hate Edward Snowden, to make they see these reasons between them to try and break them apart, because together the whistleblowers are an unstoppable force. So they do so much to try to see them against each other, to turn them against each other. It's that same divide and conquer. So when you have targeted individuals being told to hate the most targeted individuals in the world, the ones that are actually publishing documents that prove that this stuff is happening, that was why I wanted to get out here and say, don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Do the research, read the docs, and that's it.
Great point. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, Suzie, for spending all this time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge base, and just thank you for being you and doing the great work that you do. I think all of us should be supporting you. So I'll be putting out all those links out there below the video. And, if you need me to send anything, to put anything else in the video description, just send it to me and I will do so.
No problem. Thank you for having me. And
absolutely. Thank you. Have a great night. Well, great morning, actually. Bye-bye.